the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time.
Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or far ball, slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
I agree with the protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining me. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. And, of course, whether you're listening on DAB Plus radio, on your smart speaker, whether you're watching on YouTube or your connected device, or, I don't know, just hearing voices in your head. It's great to have your company. Lots to talk about today, an awful lot. As there is every day, and we're with you all the way until 1. Particularly coming up in this hour, we're going to be talking a little bit about Kemi Badenoch dismissing the idea of an election pact with Reform UK as for the birds, warning that striking a deal with Reform would drive away Tory voters. But would it? Love to hear your thoughts on that. Meanwhile, current and former Conservative MPs are at war over how best to tackle the Reform UK challenge. Leaked WhatsApp messages, not as damaging as those messages that were actually sent between Labour MPs, though. We're also going to be talking about the extraordinary story of completely lunatic new health minister who's replaced Andrew Gwynn, who got sacked because of those WhatsApp messages. And she basically says that, well, you know, if someone, even with all their bits, identifies as a woman, then they are a woman, they are female, and you can identify as a llama if you want. I'd love to know from you today what you're identifying as. We're going to be talking about that. The NHS doctor who is a trans-identifying man, trying to use his phrase, not trans woman, so we're clear, a man who believes he is a woman and is living as if he were a woman, but is, nevertheless, a man, who insisted on using the women's changing rooms in the hospital, despite the fact that female nurses were rather unhappy about that, and one spoke out about it. She's now at a tribunal, but Dr Beth Upton, a man, stated in evidence to the Employment Tribunal that I'm biologically female, and said sex had no defined or agreed meaning in science, wouldn't be able to tell the sex of a newborn baby. I don't think this man should be allowed to practice medicine, because if you don't know some of those basics, which I'm pretty sure your average 6-year-old would know, I'm not sure I want you treating patients. Going out on a limb there. Anyway, all that coming up, plus the latest madness of people who haven't been able to be deported. This one, the latest, a Pakistani father jailed for child sex offences, escaping deportation because it would be, wait for it, unduly harsh on his own children to be separated from him. I didn't make that up. That's literally what happened. The world has gone completely mad, but we're going to try and make some sense of it, as we do. And joining me to make sense of it, editor of Spiked Online, Tom Slater. Very good morning to you. Yeah, so usual madness. Don't even know where to start. There's lots I want to talk about, but I'm going to start with a story we've actually put out as our question today. Yeah. And look, I'd love to hear from you on all the big topics of the day, including what Mike was just talking about and with me just a few moments ago about Gen Z. This Gen Z thing. Basically, young adults up to the age of 27. I mean, can we just say people in their 20s? Would that not be easier? But no. They have to call them Gen Z. No one knows what you're talking about. Anyway, people in their 20s basically think they're ashamed of their country and they wouldn't fight for it. Just fascinated to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. But in particular, I want to talk about new Labour Health Minister. She's been appointed to replace Andrew Gwynn over the old, I hope you die, sod off about your bins, I don't care, WhatsApp messages. Her name is Ashley Dalton. No, I'd never heard of her either. But she is the brand new Labour Health Minister. Bearing in mind, he's got, how many MPs? 400 MPs to choose from? Apparently, she was the best next one on the list. She thinks that, yes, if you identify as a woman, then you are a woman, even if you've got your dangly bits. So if you can have a penis, so she agrees with Keir Starmer that, yeah, you can be a woman if you have a penis. She also says that you can identify as a llama if you want, and you should be treated with respect and dignity. Your thoughts, gratefully received. Some of the first messages we received to the tweet we put out are understandable but unreadable on air. I think you know what I mean. It might have been a word or two beginning with F. But what is your reaction to this? Because this isn't just some rando mad counsellor or some idiot on the internet. This woman, I don't know, I'm assuming she identifies as a woman and not as, I don't know, a wombat or whatever she is today. She believes that women can have a penis and that people can identify as a llama or anything else if they want to be treated with dignity and respect. She's a health minister. She's a health minister in this government. What is your reaction to that? Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222. You can send us a message on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Now, Tom, there are lots of important things going on. We're going to talk about Donald Trump and the Gaza ceasefire. Going to talk about assisted dying. There is an awful lot of important stuff. But fundamentally, I can't expect a government to do anything sensible when there's a Prime Minister who's appointing people who have utterly lunatic, insane views that it'd be quite funny if your 5-year-old mentioned them at tea time and you'd have a laugh about it and you'd bring it up at your speech at her wedding. I remember the time when Ashley thought you could be a llama if you wanted. Ha ha ha, a toast to Ashley the llama. Wouldn't that be funny? She's a government minister. This is actually not just silly, this is terrifying.
You sound almost surprised though, Julia. I mean,
I know, why?
In fairness to Keir Starmer, I think given the nature of the Labour Party these days, it'd be quite difficult for him to find someone who didn't, when pressed, would say that you could identify as a llama. They are lost to this stuff. Incidentally, by the by, if you are into your gender ideology, I mean, not that I want to give these people tips, don't fall at the llama hurdle. Just say, don't be ridiculous. But the fact that people still feel the need to say, of course, you can identify as a bat or a
And we do have kids in
animal.
school, in some of the maddest schools. By the way, get your kids out of those schools, people.
Yeah.
Seriously, get your kid out of these schools.
Not a good idea.
There's always a choice somewhere where kids are allowed to identify as cats and get a litter tray. And people think this stuff is made up. No, it's actually happening. Everyone needs to be given, frankly, a slap. Everyone needs a slap over this. I'm sorry, shut up. You're talking. People don't do that enough anymore. Everyone's like, oh, be kind. Although the be kind people are always the one who are sending rape threats to women who stand up on this. I was debating with a well-known columnist of the Mail on Sunday, Dan Hodges, online yesterday about this, saying, I don't know why people can't just be polite and kind. If someone wants to call themselves she or her, I don't know what the big deal is. Well, we were polite for about 10 years. Women were polite, and then they threatened to rape and kill and punch us in the face because we went, yeah, but we don't mind the she-her thing, but you can't actually get into our changing rooms and our toilets and refuges and be put in with women in prison cells. And then you started attacking us. So, time for politeness is over. You're all insane. You're absolutely stark, staring insane. It's a load of nonsense. We're not playing along anymore. We are done with this madness. And a man saying he is a woman, as opposed to a man saying, I feel very feminine, I want to wear a dress, I want to be called you. Fine, I don't care. Live your best life. I don't care. But don't tell me you're a woman and make me pretend to believe it under pain of losing my job, being imprisoned, going off for social media. It's not that much to ask.
Absolutely. And politeness is not what is being demanded here. People are generally polite, of people of all different... You know, people could have
I used to use people's preferred pronouns out of politeness until I realised the implications.
But this is a movement which is unique among any other that we've seen in recent years because of the fact that it doesn't want tolerance
for its own.
Absolutely, yeah. or just live and let live. It demands you to believe in it. It demands you to reshape the world.
And also, it's not the same as gay people want. We want the same rights as straight people. Quite rightly, I fought for gay marriage and things like that. But it's trans people. Trans-identified it's actually activists, but largely, not a lot of people who identify as trans, demanding women's rights, demanding someone else's rights.
And the end of women's spaces, the end of women's rights. It's trying to shred a lot of things which were very hard-won and very, very important. Yeah. That's what people are upset about. When people have, some people, Dan Hodges, others who maybe have kind of paid attention to this debate for the last 5 minutes, perhaps you can forgive them. This reading of it. But at the same time, we have been talking about this for a very long time. The number of people who've had their names dragged through the mud just for saying things like there are two biological sexes.
People who've lost their jobs and their livelihoods.
There's also a lot of people who've been young people, confused people who have, had life-altering procedures done to them because of this ideology, because they were pushed down a particular pathway. So the time for just saying, "Oh, why aren't you being more polite?" I mean, it is almost insulting at this point.
Yeah,
to that kind of
sod off, and I'm being polite at that point. I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because this is one of my bugbears, but I'm done with this. I'm absolutely done with this. And I do not trust this government. The last lot were useless on this as well. It all happened under their watch, but I am done with this. 03444 499 1000 for your thoughts, please. Let's get back to a lot of the big battles going on front page of the papers today about Kemi Badenoch as the Tory leader, basically saying deal with Nigel Farage and reform ahead of the next election is for the birds, even for the local elections coming up in May. There's a WhatsApp war. Now, we were told there's going to be a good WhatsApp story involving the Tories. It's not a good story, frankly. It's let's be honest, with all due respect to the journalists involved, it is not like what we found out from that Labour WhatsApp group where outrageous things being said. Although I did note you wrote a fantastic piece to The Spectator, which I completely agree with, which is don't think anyone should be losing their job over WhatsApps they write. And we were saying this with Sam Armstrong on the show yesterday. Could we be allowed to have private conversations? His misjudgment in sharing it with the whole number of people. I think that's where hypocrisy.
Yeah, absolutely.
But as a general rule, I think people should be allowed to have private conversations and say whatever they want.
And I think we should all support that position out of self-preservation, if anything else. There's a lot of people who see one of these scandals of someone saying something offensive or a bit outrageous in private, and everyone has to pretend like they would never do anything like that. They might not have said the particular things that this guy said. He went quite far. Let's be frank about it. But at the same time, let's recognise that sometimes people say things in private they wouldn't say in public. And it's not because they secretly believe the private thing. They're just got a weird sense of
And some
humour.
of them are jokes. And I have to say, Sam and I agreed yesterday, actually, some of the WhatsApps were quite funny.
Yeah.
I mean, they actually were. But you think back, in the service industry, which is effectively what MPs are. I mean, I think about what we used to say about some of the customers. Think about what I used to do to some of my customers' food and drinks. But there we are. Don't be rude to the waitress. Top tip in life for you guys. But do you think there's any chance there is going to be any deal? I mean, it's all very well they can say there's not going to be a deal, but at the end of the day, we are looking at a situation where we are stuck with this god-awful, useless, abjectly wrong on everything other than planning for housing. That's it, Labour government. They're going to win another big majority next time round on the current figures. I know weeks-long time of politics, 4 years is even longer. But currently, if the right are split, they can cancel each other out and let Labour get back in again. Is it worth a pact, even if people didn't get everything they wanted?
Well, it just seems like neither side have any incentive or interest right now from their own preservation of their own political fortunes to enter into that kind of deal. If your main objective is to keep Keir Starmer out of government, what you're saying is absolutely true. It's the only way that's going to take place. But at the same time, Farage wants to replace the Conservative Party, and that's a big part of his argument, is that this party has had its days. We're not just keeping it honest, we want to replace it and get rid of it. And Badenoch should be essentially agreeing to the dissolution of the Conservative Party as we know it.
And there would be a lot of Tories who would leave. They go to the Lib Demi side, although a lot of them were already
they should have probably been to begin with. But
it was the Conservative Party that changed, not Conservative voters.
And it's one of those things where I think a lot rides on if reforms numbers continue to tick up. There's been a big debate as to whether that 25% roughly that they're hitting at the moment is a ceiling, or whether they can actually break through, because the closer they get to 30%, the more of a firm argument they have to say of, well, no, let's just keep going. Like,
but there is also in the first past the post system, there is, depending on how your votes are distributed, there is a point, there's sort of a tipping point where you go from having, there's a point you go from having 5 seats to 70 seats. To 200 seats, and it can be just a couple of percentage points, just tip over the edge. It's going to be absolutely fascinating to watch that. Immigration and deportation is very much in the news this week. Talked a lot about it on the show yesterday, so I won't talk too long in this section. But the latest story about a failure to deport. I mean, Nigel Farage blasted the Home Office boast of, we moved 19,000 immigrants, pointing out, way more than that have arrived. There are, hundreds of thousands of illegal immigrants in London alone. Many, people who've arrived illegally, many who've just overstayed visas. No one. It's interesting how much the public's reaction to, you've deported, 600 a month. People weren't going, that's really good. That's like dropping the ocean. So, 600 a day arrive sometimes, for goodness sake. And that's just on the boats, the ones we know about, as opposed to people overstaying visas. But the latest story about a Pakistani paedophile, can't be named, got to protect him and his family, obvs. He's escaped deportation, although, again, it was all, appealed and everything. But yet again, another one of these immigration courts. Basically, he's the father of 2 toddlers. He was convicted of trying to get 3 young girls to engage in sex and was basically a predatory paedophile. Call him what he is. He was jailed for 18 months. Question marks about being only jailed for 18 months. Let's go through all the lists here. But when he came out, basically they were trying to deport him, as you want to deport him. But no, apparently the court ruled that it would be unduly harsh for the children to be without their father. Now, he's not allowed to live with them, and he can only have supervised contact with them. Not my problem, I'm afraid. Not my problem if he's unduly harsh. I think what's unduly harsh in kids is to grow up to know that your dad's a paedophile. Is it just me? I don't know. But, the fact that people like that sort of crime can be committed. Apparently the wife felt that she was partly to blame because, having had COVID, she wasn't able to have sex with her husband. So that would absolutely justify him trying to track down young girls on the internet to have sex with them. Are you kidding me?
I just don't know how anyone cannot support the position that we need to look at our human rights framework, that we need to pull out of the ECHR if necessary, because people have this debate on this kind of lofty plane which is completely detached from reality. They'll start waxing lyrical about the end of the Second World War and Winston Churchill. Do we really think that when this convention was drew up, what they had in mind was the hard-won rights of paedophiles, acid attackers, people who flash women in public or come into the country illegally so they can operate in an Albanian crime gang? Is that really who we were thinking of when we thought that we need to give shelter to the huddled masses of the world if they find themselves in conflict or difficulty? Of course not. No one deep down actually supports that, and yet this is allowed to carry on just because it would look wrong to do otherwise. Yeah. It's better to look good than to do good in this situation.
It's the fact that they think it looks good. That's the really scary bit. What do you make? Looking overseas. What do you make of the Israel-Gaza situation? Donald Trump, once again, late last night, our time, he's made some punchy remarks. This after Hamas basically said, we're not going to release hostages on Saturday as promised. We believe that Israel has breached the terms of the ceasefire deal. Hamas has breached it numerous times already. It's interesting that they're claiming the delay in letting people return to northern Gaza. Well, that was a couple of weeks ago. That was all resolved. Not enough aid going in. Loads of aid is going in. Also, I've seen enough footage now from Gaza. Yeah, people ain't looking too starving to me. Certainly the Hamas soldiers looking fighting fit, holding their weapons up in their camouflage, aren't they? But he basically, Hamas said they've postponed the hostage releases. They're desperately trying to get those. This is the second phase of talks being back on track. But we're still looking at a couple of dozen of hostages still due to be released. Donald Trump has said basically if it was up to him, he'd scrap the deal of the hostage delay if they don't release all the hostages, not 3, all the hostages on Saturday by midday. All hell will break loose. But he says, but it's up to Israel. How significant is that, do you think?
I think it's very significant. This was being predicted from pretty early on, that whilst the first phase of the ceasefire deal was probably odds on to happen more or less, that it was going to break down sooner or later. We certainly weren't going to going to get to that second phase. I think people maybe didn't expect it to break down this quickly, but you are dealing with Hamas, an organisation who, to put it lightly, are not honest brokers in any kind of negotiation.
Again, I'm always amazed that people are surprised that a terrorist organisation that rape and massacre and starve people in tunnels for 16 months aren't trustworthy, because I would absolutely think those are the people I would trust their word as their honour.
Absolutely. It's been a shocker for all involved, but a learning experience, I'm sure.
Yep.
And also a lot of questions about is this a stalling technique? Because this is one thing about the horrendous situation of the hostages, is that at various points Hamas have either not known who is still alive and where they are,
Yep.
or they do know and they're not letting on for particular reasons. You saw that with the Bibas family.
Yep.
You know, this is an element to this story which is going to sort of tumble out as these hostages are released, and maybe that's part of the equation here as well.
Genuinely, one of my thoughts is that actually they don't actually have. You saw the state of the last 3 men to come out looking like Belson victims. Frankly, I'm kind of at the point where I'm thinking I don't think there are many hostages still alive. We know that at least there's one who celebrated his 24th birthday yesterday. We know because the other captives had been with him, but they know the family now know the terrible conditions he's held in. There's an urgency in getting who is still alive out. I wonder actually how many people are still alive, given they were given quite deliberately starvation rations, just enough to keep them alive. How many people would have succumbed? Lots of people who had injuries. Certainly got to have big question marks about whether or not those two, the baby and the toddler, now would be both toddlers, are alive. I wonder if Hamas are delaying because they've realised, we might have messed up here because we've exposed to the world just what we really like. Because they did enjoy those headlines when everyone said, look at those girls who've been released. Well, they look, one of them's quite plump. They've obviously been well looked after while they've been held in tunnels by Hamas for 16 months. I mean, we are in a scary, mixed up, crazy world. I wonder an awful lot of the people who say they wouldn't fight for our country and would defend people who fight for, being a llama, all the crazy, mad people. There'll be also the crazy, mad people who think that, Hamas are justified in what they're doing and are going on marches for them. But there we are. 10:21 is the time. I'd love to hear your thoughts on anything and everything we're talking about, but particularly llamas. And people in their 20s wouldn't fight for their country. But just the general, utter madness of where we are. I'd love you to give us a call. 0344 499 1000 is the number. We'll get straight to your messages up next. This is Talk.
I know what you're going to say, yeah.
Labour has just suspended Burnley MP Oliver Ryan, the party, over his membership of that WhatsApp group that contained offensive comments. The comments were homophobic, misogynistic, racist and anti-Semitic as well. Your response to that quickly, Harry?
I think, he was sort of in trouble from the moment he woke up this morning. I think this was a matter of time, and right on cue, just as the papers are starting to file for deadline, Labour have moved.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It's 10:25. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is the Home of Common Sense. Tom Slater's still with me. Plenty of common sense from him, as there is from all of our guests. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot of common sense from you because we are living in just a parallel universe. It's just the people who are in charge of us are completely stark, staring insane. And I'm being polite. The new Labour Health Minister, Ashley Dalton. No, I'd never heard of her either, but now she's the Health Minister. She actually has power over stuff that affects you and me in the NHS. She says that women can have a penis. So she agrees with the Prime Minister on that madness. Women can't have a penis because that makes them a man. It's really, really not complicated. And people can identify as a llama if they want, and they should be entitled to dignity and respect. What is your reaction to that? 0344 499 1000. Keep it clean. It's quite hard to do that, but we're doing our best. Chris is on the line in Epsom. Hello, Chris.
Oh, morning, Julia.
Hello.
Morning, Tom. Let's just start off with I sent you a tweet in the first 5 minutes of your programme voting for you to be Premier.
Oh, I mean,
what you said,
mate, it's not. No, it's not going to be an election. It's going to be totalitarian. We're going to go Xi Jinping, Putin style, Empress of the world. I mean, we're going to have to do this. It's the only answer, mate.
Julia, I would vote for you with my last breath. I really would. Listen, I sit here now talking to you, feeling broken and disheartened, but understanding why Gen Z feel like they do.
Well, just for people who've just tuned in, Gen Z, by the way, basically people late teens for their 20s, they apparently don't. They think they're ashamed of their country. They wouldn't fight for it. Only 1 in 10 would fight for it, and about half of them think that we're a racist country.
Well, Julia, this October will be the 40 years since I left Britain's army. Armed forces. Yeah. I was proud to wear the uniform and to go to war for my country.
And we're very grateful that you did.
Thank you. And I understand that since Blair's time, and all of this roots back to Blair, unfortunately, with everybody going to university, the universities teaching absolute rubbish. Yep. The normal curriculum in schools not being taught about my forefathers, 3 of them laying down their lives in the Second World War, and even more relatives in the First World War. Yeah. I sit here and look at a plaque that says, "I am a veteran. My oath never expires." Yeah. I would not fight for what we are now. I'm proud of what we were, and I would fight for a future.
That's interesting. And is it mad things like health ministers thinking people can identify as a llama that makes you feel that way?
Oh God, listen, I mean, how the hell did she even get a job as an MP? Never mind a health.
Someone voted for her.
Yeah, but it's ludicrous. And that doctor that still has his bits, and he's told in the tribunal that he's a biological woman. I mean, where is this coming from?
I know. We're going to talk more about that one later. But that's the thing. We are in mad territory, and people think, well, you need to be polite about it, and you're a transphobe or a bigot if you're not, as opposed to one of the first fundamental things we must defend is facts and truth, right? We've got truth is very, very important. And it's literally just like, we can't allow this madness to continue. We are never going to rebuild our country. We're never going to be, make Britain great again if we don't face some fundamental facts and we don't talk truth. Because if people are allowed to just believe mad things and we all play along with madness, I mean, we are going to go down the drain.
Julia, the biggest thing is to rebuild Britain is our power grid. Now, gas prices have reached a 2-year high again because of demand, because of cold weather in Europe, and because of our lack of storage, which is all about bad planning. Now, Mad Ed Miliband, all right, there is no proof now. There is far more scientific evidence now that carbon is not an accelerator of global warming.
They're not interested in facts. It's a religious zealotry. But also, you know what? Everyone's got to stop just blaming Ed Miliband. The only reason he is Energy Secretary is because Keir Starmer appointed him. I blame the Prime Minister. As fundamental as that. Listen, Mark, Chris, sorry, I could talk to you all day, but I've got to get to another caller, but do call in again. And I think most of us say, thank you for your service. I mean, you know, we should be so much more respectful of the armed forces in this country than people are. Let's go to Mark. He's on the line. He's in Glasgow. Hello, Mark.
Good morning.
Good morning. What do you want to say?
Well, I just first of all like to make it clear that I identify as a heterosexual male, he, him, global majority of a global minority, omnivore with vegetarian, occasional vegan tendencies. And I hope that doesn't offend anybody.
Oh, no, I hope it does. I thought we'd outlawed you people.
Oh, God, if only. Well, you know, what can I say? In agreement with the gentleman previously, this is Tony Blair's globalism, and it's still going on. Starmer is, he's one of these sort of lawyer types that likes defending civil liberties.
Yep.
Look at pretty much everything they're doing. It's civil, Chagos, it's civil liberties, but it's kind of screwed up.
No, it's human rights. It's human rights. That's what they think, you know.
Sorry, you're right, human rights. But there never were any Mauritius involvements in Chagos Island. So why doesn't he offer the people who are Chagosians, who live here now? Tell you what, guys, we're happy to take your families back there, set you up, give you homes, give you solar-powered heating, whatever lighting, and that'll cost us about, I don't know, 500 mil compared to the
max
19 billion.
I think we should just leave things exactly as they are. I'm just throwing that out there. But so listen, I mean, so I just want to check: do you or do you not want a health minister who thinks you can identify as a llama?
I don't want a health minister who identifies as anything other than either a man or a woman. And I don't want a doctor who wanders around saying he's a biological female when he's got a penis. Something I saw in the United States, and I'm sure you can bleep it out, and it was based on the back.
We can't. We can't bleep it out. Don't say a word that you're not allowed to say on air, please.
It's not a rude word.
Okay.
Some people may be, but only if they're loons. It said, if you got a dick, you ain't a chick.
Okay, that wasn't helpful. Okay, but we're going to get away. Apologies. No, come on. We could guess the rhyme. Mark, don't get me in trouble. Apologies for the language. Mark, thank you very much indeed. 10:32 is the time. Right now, it is time to find out how you could be in chance of winning £25,000.
It's competition time, and we're giving you a chance to win a whopping £25,000. So what do you need to do to get involved? All you have to do is text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post. It's as simple as that. Once again, to get involved, just text the word prize to 83338, or you can enter by post.
18 plus, UK excluding NI. Enter by SMS for £2 plus one standard network charge by 11 p.m. on March the 3rd, 2025. Or send your name, email and contact number to £25,000 cash competition, PO Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on March the 6th, 2025. This is a news broadcasting network promotion. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
That, of course, is Mike Graham with that fantastic competition. Good luck with that. Now, we're going to take a quick break. Coming up after that, we are going to be talking about whether or not there could be a Tory reform pact, whether or not we should have health ministers who think you can identify as a llama, what those steel tariffs mean, and plenty more besides. That's all coming up. We'll be talking to Baroness Kate Hoey. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning to you. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. 10:36 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater's still with me. We're delighted to be joined right now by Kate Hoey. Baroness Hoey is an independent peer and former Labour MP. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. Lots to talk about. Can I just start with the topic we're talking about? Because as a former Labour MP, luckily not in one of those WhatsApp groups which saw the end of Andrew Gwynn's career and another Tory MP, Labour MP, 29-year-old fresh-faced thing. That was it ended before it began. He's been sacked from being a minister, being replaced by Ashley Dalton, an MP who thinks that women can have a penis and that people can identify as a llama if they want, and it should be treated with dignity and respect for doing so, as opposed to sent off to the men in white coats, which is what we used to do with people like that. What do you make of, well, frankly, how far your former party has fallen?
Well, you really couldn't make it up. You'd think it was an April Fool joke when you heard it first, and of course, it wasn't that long ago. I mean, sometimes people get told off and something's found out that they've said years and years ago, but this wasn't that long ago. No. And it's just ridiculous. And I think, I don't know whether she's come out and said something, but I wouldn't like to be in her first interview because I expect that would be the first question she gets asked. Well, ridiculous. And I thought Keir Starmer has made some very strange appointments. I mean, just look at his Attorney General, his best mate, who's now, doing all sorts of things.
Lord Hermer, yeah.
Care about the country.
Well, I have to say, though, I mean, I don't know why Keir Starmer would have a problem with appointing someone who thinks that women can have a penis, because so does he think exactly the same. We have a Prime Minister who doesn't understand basic biology.
It's just, and I know everyone keeps referring to what Trump's done, but, that bit where he talked about men and women's sport, no men and women's sport, you couldn't imagine Keir Starmer saying that. And yet that's what we need. We need some leadership. We need some direction at the top to try and put an end to a lot of this nonsense. It's actually causing a lot of problems and a lot of misery to people, but also it's just showing that the Labour Party really hasn't learned anything. And although they're in government, I really can't see how, even with that huge majority, they've got such a big majority, they can do what they like, but they are storing up so much trouble for the future.
Yeah, I mean, they're backing down on some things. They realise how unpopular they are, but I mean, they're pushing ahead. They are still completely captured by this lunatic woke ideology. And yet, if you look at where we are in terms of the right being, centre right, as opposed to hard right, I mean, just right wing parties being basically separated, on the right. At the end of the day, they can cancel each other out if there is no electoral pact of any sort of deal, like we'll stand down in this seat, you stand down in that, or a formal coalition between Reform and the Tories. We are looking at, as things stand right now in the polls, even if Reform go even higher, we are looking at Labour getting back in with a sizable majority because of that split on the right. Would you back, you're an independent peer, you're ex-Labour, but you've supported a lot of the causes like the Brexit cause, which are associated, I think quite wrongly, with the right, but you've been very sensible and saying an awful lot of the key topics that actually affect people's real lives. Do you think that the Tories and Reform should actually form some sort of deal of some kind to ensure that Labour don't get a free run at the next election?
Well, I think it's really far too early in the electoral cycle to be thinking of any kind of links and join ups. And I really, at the moment, I can totally understand why Reform would not even think of having any kind of merger with the Conservative Party. I mean, look what happened during the Brexit campaign and the election after, when they pulled out and thought that they were doing a deal which was going to mean that the Conservatives were absolutely committed to Brexit, and that didn't happen. I think Kemi Badenoch has to become much more outward looking in terms of what she's saying and what she's doing, and giving her members, particularly her active members, a real feeling that she knows where they're going.
Yeah.
But Reform are going to continue to do well. We're going to see these there'll probably be a by-election, I think, in Andrew Gwynn's seat. Yeah. I could be wrong, but there'll be a by-election. There's the council elections, and despite Labour trying to stop the elections in many of those councils where they were...
and the Tories quite happy about that.
The Tories are quite happy about that. Yes, I would think so. The only party that's going to be really angry, of course, is Reform. But Reform has to also not. I think it'd be a big mistake for Reform, and I'm not a member of Reform, although I support a lot of their policies and have worked closely with them on different issues. I do think they've got to be clear that they're not just going to mop up a lot of Conservative MPs who suddenly think, oh my goodness, my seat's at risk. Because if they do that and they allow Conservative MPs in particular seats to join them to keep their seat at the next election, that is going to really upset a lot of ordinary members of Reform who've worked hard, who've got local people, and they've got to realise now that they've got to be a proper party and have proper organisation at grassroots level. I think Nigel's beginning to realise that.
Yeah. I mean, there are lots of big issues still ongoing. We've got to look at the economy in the doldrums. I mean, very, very low growth forecast, if anything at all. That's going to be hit. And we think, a small point, but nevertheless, it will hit everybody with these US steel tariffs imposed by Donald Trump. Only 10% of our exports of steel and aluminium go to America, but it does mean that pretty much we're going to be hit around the world. It's going to mean that everything we buy that involves steel, and aluminium, which especially aluminium, an awful lot of things, canned goods and the others are going to be hit. Now, I mean, do you think that Keir Starmer, who we're told could meet with Donald Trump in the White House as early as possibly next week, do you think he's a Prime Minister who can sort of do a deal, make nicey with Donald Trump? Is he someone who can stand up for Britain?
Well, I wish we had a Prime Minister that was going to stand up for our country, but I think Donald Trump will kind of eat him for breakfast almost. It's the sort of feeling that he hasn't stood up for our country over the past. He's beginning to realise now that being patriotic is something that actually people in this country want. So he is he's rowing back. But he could have done so much more earlier. I mean, he could have, the whole way that they treated Trump before the election. I mean, Trump being the kind of person he is, he'd probably laugh and joke about it. But, it must have been it was a wasted opportunity. It was pretty clear that Trump was going to do well, if not win, from early on. And instead of sort of reacting to that and sending people out behind the scenes to do some sort of getting to know people and making clear that they understood that Trump might win, they didn't do anything. So I don't blame Trump if he wants to now kind of punish Starmer, but I don't think he will, because he actually does genuinely, I think, care about the United Kingdom. Yeah. And, if you've got a mother who was born and reared in Scotland, that gives you a very long link with this country. And so I think if the Prime Minister played his cards right and he got some support from his own party to actually bend over a little bit more towards Trump, I think we might miss out on the worst thing. What we mustn't do, of course, is use that as an opportunity to try and sort of say, oh, we're going to work closer with the European Union and we're going to fight with the European Union.
They, as a senior Brexiteer, they don't need any excuse for that. Can I ask just one final question? It's very much leading the news again today. And as I hadn't warned you about this, but I think as a peer, you're going to get a vote on this when it goes to the House of Lords. But this assisted dying bill that's going through the House of Commons, it's already got through its second reading. It's now at the committee stage where they're doing the line by line, agreeing everything. Now, one of the key things that a lot of people said they'd vote, a lot of MPs in particular said they would vote for, was assisted dying. They were concerned about it. They weren't in principle opposed to it, but they particularly wanted there to be a lot of safeguards, in particular having a High Court judge have the final say on whether or not it was safe and someone wasn't being pressured or forced into assisted dying. The Labour MP who's brought that private members bill in, Kim Leadbeater, she has basically said, well, because everyone's saying it will clog up the family courts. Right, well, OK, we won't have a High Court judge. We'll have a panel with a lawyer, level, a KC or something, a psychiatrist and a social worker, and that will be just fine, and it will work that way. A lot of people are very concerned about that. Where do you stand on that? Does that undo a safeguard that for you would be vital, or would you be opposed to the bill or in favour of the bill no matter what?
Well, I think what this has really done, and I think they will probably regret this, because I think it has made people lose trust in what was being considered. It's a very, very difficult issue, and members of Parliament and peers do take these things very, very seriously. I mean, we are, after all, looking at life and death, yes. And it's something that people like to do. But I think, to me, I mean, having a High Court judge was always going to be difficult anyway, because I could see how many High Court judges we'd need to deal with some of these issues. I mean, I was on balance against the bill, and I think, to be honest, this kind of the way they're now handling it is going to make it much, much more difficult in the Lords in particular to get it through. And I think people will feel that they've been sort of let down a bit by.
I think people feel rightly, deceived on this. It's really interesting.
Because even a couple of weeks ago, she was saying this was not going to happen. So it's been handled badly.
Absolutely. Baroness Kate Hoey, always good to get your thoughts. She'll get a vote on that eventually. Independent peer and former Labour MP. Thank you for that. Tom Slater, we're going to come to this in the next hour, actually, this topic, the assisted dying bill. I've been very much, long time, in favour of assisted dying with massive safeguards. I've seen where it's been a slippery slope elsewhere. Very, very worried about that. People can't afford care, worried about being a burden on their families. I don't want those people ever to consider it. But people who are dying or in unbearable pain, I would extend the bill to people in unbearable physical pain. I think it should be allowed. I would want it for myself and for my family members. But with massive safeguards, Kim Leadbeater has been very secretive of this. She's packed a select committee with experts who are almost entirely on her side of the debate, not wanting to have a proper debate on it, shutting other people out who have a perfectly valid and very expert opinion on these things. And now the biggest thing that she claimed was we've got this massive safeguard. A High Court judge would have to make the final decision. They're dropping that. Do you think this bill is actually likely to go through Parliament? Because as someone who's massively in favour of assisted dying, if I were an MP, I would not now vote for this bill.
And I think that's the core damning indictment of it, is the fact that when it did pass, it wasn't on a kind of wave of emphatic support. People said, we support this. The general mood was that the House kind of supported it in principle, but would like to see the detail and how it panned out. The way it's been handled ever since then has been atrocious. I mean, there has been the stacking of the committee itself, the skew of the people who were allowed to give evidence before it, the fact that at one point they were even resisting having members from the Royal College of Psychiatry address them, even though they would obviously take a view on this particular issue, the way in which the safeguards, which were much trumpeted, tended to melt away, either because they were deemed impractical or for other reasons, and also just this general kind of caginess of the discussion, I think has made this bill look a lot. It's revealed this bill to be full of holes. It needs to be completely
and utterly open and above board and fair, so people get there say, we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the show as well. More from Tom, more from you. Do get your calls in 0344 499 1000. Up next, we're going to talk more about the mad trans ideology, woke madness. A Labour health minister saying nonsense things like you can identify as a llama if you want. Love to hear your thoughts on that. And also going to talk about that employment tribunal where an NHS doctor who's a man but claims he's a woman says he is actually biologically female. How on earth is this man allowed to treat patients? That's up next. This is Talk.
changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name. The Panama Canal is vital to our country. It's being operated by China. China. You get rid of that artificially drawn line, Canada and the United States, that would really be something. All hell will break out in the Middle East, and it will not be good for Hamas, and it will not be good, frankly, for anyone.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Thank you for joining me. Let's go straight to my next guest, Amy Gallagher. She's a former NHS nurse and a commentator at the New Culture Forum. And Amy, have I got a couple of great topics for you today? Good morning.
Morning, Julia.
It's a right up your strata. Let's start first with the new Labour Health Minister, Ashley Dalton, who's been appointed after Andrew Gwynn wrote those horrible messages on WhatsApp and lost his job. She's been appointed. She is, of course, as woke can be, as many Labour MPs are. She believes that, yes, a man who identifies as a woman, is a trans woman, is female, is a woman, and so therefore, of course, women can have a penis. Mind you, so does the Prime Minister apparently think that. And frankly, she says, if people want to identify as a llama, they should also be respected and treated with dignity. What do you make of that? As a former nurse, an NHS, health minister believes those things.
Well, they've replaced one MP who was making offensive comments with another one who was making offensive comments, because to me, to my mind, these comments are offensive towards women, gay people, all sorts of people who believe in reality. Yeah. And it's extremely concerning. I mean, Labour are giving off real mixed messages around gender ideology and trans, because West Streeting has come out, publicly supported the Darlington nurses, who are, of course, suing their NHS trust for making them share a changing room with a man. And he's publicly come out and said that DEI is daft and it's gone too far in the NHS, and yet they are now appointing a health minister who, as you say, believes that you can identify as a llama. So what do the Labour Party, where do they stand on gender ideology? Nobody knows. It just goes from one extreme to the other.
I mean, this is the thing. I mean, again, and they try and they're trying to sound sort of all sensible about it. It's even when Keir Starmer said before the election, 99.9% of women don't have a penis. It's like, what you think 0.1% do? That's roughly 30,000. There are 30,000 women wandering around this country who apparently have a penis. I mean, but I've never met one of them, never seen them in the changing rooms, none of my mates. Okay, I'll do my regular check. Nope, still haven't grown one.
Yeah, I mean, it's not hard to get right. It's not hard for a political party to have a kind of a consistent stance on all of this thing. And you do wonder why Keir Starmer's doing this. Is he trying to kind of keep both sides kind of within the Labour Party? Yeah. What's going on?
So wait a minute. Keep both sides, sane and the insane? Because this is the thing. It's like we should be respectful. People like, no, I mean, if someone genuinely identifies as a llama, identifies as an animal, they genuinely believe that, I'm very sympathetic, but you need psychological help. And you definitely, and I definitely do not have to respect that or dignify that, because that is asking me to believe in lunatic things.
Well, this MP said that people who identify as llamas should be treated with dignity and respect. I mean, I agree they should be treated. They should be treated by a psychiatrist, but not treated with respect. Actually, I don't respect people who identify as llamas. I feel sorry for them.
Well, kindness and pity is more appropriate, isn't it? Well, here's the thing. It's not just a health minister, an NHS doctor. Also, we have this issue. Now, just to explain to people a bit of background, and again, I hate that this copy, always, even the Telegraph, which has been very sound on this, will say things like, someone was born male. No, if you're born male, you're male. You're not born male and then... If you're male, you're male. You're female, you're female. Them's the facts, people. But we've got an employment tribunal that's going on at the moment, and it's been brought by a nurse, Sandy Peggy, who's a woman. She was forced by her local NHS hospital trust, Five Trust, to change she changes in a women's changing room because she's a woman, and she's forced to change with a man. This is Dr. Beth Upton, who is, quote, born male, identifies as a woman. So a trans-identifying man insists on using, but he was told by bosses, you should use the women's changing room because we recognise that, you identify as a trans woman. This nurse understandably said, I feel uncomfortable. This man is looking at me while I'm changing. I'm changing out my uniform, in my bra and pants. I don't feel comfortable. Repeatedly, basically said, I don't want you in here. I had conversations. She's now been disciplined. She's gone to an employment tribunal. But astonishingly, at the tribunal yesterday, Dr. Beth Upton, the man, said that trans women have the right to get changed in front of female colleagues, insisted that he is biologically female, and said sex had no defined or agreed meaning in science. Actually said that. He said, I'm not a robot, so I'm biological, and my identity is female. Without wanting to appeal to the dictionary too much, I'm biologically female. We've got a doctor working in the NHS who is a man who believes he's biologically female. That terrifies the living daylights out of me, Amy.
Yeah, it terrifies me. And where are the BMA, the British Medical Association, in this? They should be putting out a statement urgently to say that they reject the comments of this doctor. They need to be looking into his suitability to practice. If I can cast your mind back to the pandemic, there were nurses and doctors who were disciplined or even sacked for challenging the vaccine, the coronavirus and the vaccine. Yeah. They were accused of spreading misinformation or disinformation or conspiracy theories. Now, maybe they were spreading conspiracy theories, but there's no greater misinformation than saying that biology is not accepted but in science, or that there's no such thing as biology. That's the foundation of medicine. So this doctor is putting out the worst kind of misinformation you could possibly do as a healthcare professional. This needs to be condemned immediately. It's outrageous.
Yeah, and also, this doctor, the man, said that he might have a legal document saying he's a woman, but he's still a man. But he said he's just not demanding anything other than basic respect. But what about the women nurses forced to get down to their bra and knickers in front of a man staring at them? If he wanted respect, he believes himself to be a woman, wouldn't he want those women to also feel respect and just use the disabled toilet as a private cubicle to change in? Would that not be more respectful?
Yeah, well, this nurse has explained that she was once sexually assaulted by a male doctor, and that's her reason for not wanting to change with a male doctor.
I've never been sexually assaulted. I don't want to change in front of a random man.
Exactly, but this doctor has proven he absolutely has no empathy for her, because he said, well, I'm sorry you're traumatised, but you're still a bigot and a transphobe. So that, to me, pulls into question his ability to empathise with patients. Yeah. I mean, if you're a doctor or you're working in healthcare, you need to be able to empathise with people. I would refuse to be treated by someone who did not know the difference between men and women biologically. I think that's absolutely terrifying. Amy Gallagher, so appreciate you joining us as a former nurse. Very good to get your perspective. I'm going to come to Tom Slater about this after the top of the hour, and I want to hear from you as well. Genuinely, this is happening in tribunals. We've got a health minister, we've got a prime minister who think that women can have penises, or a wealth minister who thinks that people can identify as a llama and be treated with dignity and respect, as opposed to, as Amy says, just treated. The world has gone mad. We need to talk about this. 0344 499 1000.
I spoke with His Majesty the King to request the dissolution of Parliament, and we will have a general election on the 4th of July.
I have just returned from Buckingham Palace to form the next government of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened.
I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. The shot from distance is in. It is Cole Palmer. Low ball in, or ball slides it in.
An absolute killer of a goal.
protest, but I don't think the violence was anywhere near necessary.
No, I mean, I don't think anyone, Nigel, would ever think that the violence was the answer at all.
אזרחי ישראל, אנחנו במלחמה.
I probably took a bullet to the head because of the things that they say about me.
If Donald Trump were president, Putin would be sitting in Kyiv right now.
In Springfield, they're eating the dogs, the people that came in, they're eating the cats.
Liberal left couldn't understand that this man could be anything other than the great newsreader, a man of integrity.
Is it possible in any way, shape or form that Keir Starmer didn't know about these facts about the suspect in Southport?
I find it extraordinary that he wouldn't know. It seems that the public has not been told the truth.
No, there's nothing like an American election, I have to say. North Dakota has gone red, South Dakota's red, Texas is red.
Many people have told me that God spared my life for a reason.
Bloomberg UK reporting Ukraine has made the first long-range missile strike inside of Russia.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome back to the show. I am Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or on your connected device, great to have your company. Lots more to talk about, including all these completely and utterly mad people, including the Labour Health Minister, Ashley Dalton. She says that women can have a penis and people can identify as a llama if they want. There's NHS doctor we've just been talking about who thinks that there's no difference between male and female biology, and he, born a male, so always a male. 200 years' time, you dig up his skeleton, they'll know he was a male. There's the difference. But he claims that he's biologically female and yet still practising in the NHS. Oh, by the way, not the subject of the employment tribunal. The nurse complaining about having to get into a bra and knickers while he's in the changing room is the subject of that employment tribunal. Extraordinary, extraordinary stuff. I would love your thoughts on all of that. Give us a call. 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK to 87222. Get in touch with us on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs one standard network rate message. If you want to defend all of that, do give us a call. I would love to. If you genuinely do believe that a doctor has a right to do that, genuinely believe it's absolutely fine for a health minister for God's sake, to think that women can have a penis and people should be respected and treated with dignity if they identify as a llama or anything else, I really would like to hear from you. Call your friends, ask around. Love to know what your thoughts are. We're also going to be talking more about, is everyone now poo-pooing the idea of a Tory reform alliance or coalition or merger of some sort? Tory leader Kemi Badenoch has dismissed the idea of an electoral pact with reform as for the birds. But does that mean we are going to be stuck with a Labour government again after 2029? Plus, we're going to talk more about the assisted dying bill. The Labour MP behind that private member's bill, Kim Leadbeater, she's proposed scrapping the requirement for a High Court judge to approve each death. Instead, a multidisciplinary panel of experts will examine cases and have the power to grant permission for assisted death. But is that exactly the slippery slope that many of us had feared? This is Talk. As I say, we are the home of common sense. Got loads more to talk about in this hour. My guest joining me throughout the show is Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online. Morning once again to you. Let's start with that story about the, Ashley Dalton, the health minister, and this doctor, Dr. Beth Upton. I mean, I don't care if Dr. Upton, whatever his first name was originally, he was born, I don't care what he wants to wear, I don't care what he wants to call himself, he can do what he wants, he can believe what he wants, as long as he's able to do his job properly, right? But I also feel very strongly that a woman shouldn't be forced to share a changing room with a man, and he's a man, and whatever he thinks he is, and whatever pieces of paper he's got, he's a man. And no nurse, including Sandy Peggy, the female nurse, bringing this employment tribunal, saying she's faced harassment over this, but that she's, she's the one who's actually the victim here. Shouldn't she be forced to do that? How do people get this so wrong? How does an NHS trust get this so wrong? How does a government, how does a Prime Minister get this so wrong? When the vast majority of people who would be perfectly happy and totally relaxed about someone turning up with blue hair and dressed in women's clothing, but calling themselves a trans woman, would be actually they'd be a bit perplexed, but quite understanding and sympathetic about it. How have the people in authority got so out of touch with where most people are on this, which is that, so far but not beyond that point?
No, absolutely. I think it's cowardice, I think it's ignorance, I think it's not thinking about this for more than 5 minutes. They've convinced themselves that it's just the follow-on from being accepting of any other minority or sexual orientation or what have you. They think they see it in that kind of bucket. It's completely fundamentally different. First of all, because of the fact that there are men and there are women, people can identify however they want.
How outrageous and bigoted of you.
It doesn't change the facts. And also, we should recognise it as a sinister incursion into women's rights and spaces, that how someone happens to feel about themselves should trump women's right to have their own changing rooms.
Women's reality. Also, by the way, you know what? Women fought for a lot of this. They didn't go, oh, hey, should we give women the vote? Oh, hey, should we allow women to do a tax return that their husband doesn't have to sign off, which is what my mother had to do for most years of her working life. You know, oh, hey, you know, let's let women actually have a changing room and hospital wards and refuges and things so they're safe from male predators. You know, that wasn't given to us.
Yeah.
It was demanded and fought for.
But people have kind of forgotten why those things were so important in the first place. So you take this issue of changing rooms and whatnot, people will say, well, you're just suggesting all people who are trans are sex offenders. That's as facile as suggesting that all men are sex offenders. The point is some are, and therefore you don't want them to create a situation in which they might be alone with half-naked women. Is that not hard to understand?
Here's a mind-blowing idea. It's not possible for a woman or a girl in a changing room or a toilet to know for sure whether you're one of the good ones or the bad ones.
Absolutely.
So we'd rather none of you were allowed in on it. And what's so weird is the vast majority of men are fully on board with that. They are horrified. Whenever we have to go, we're like an airport or something, and there's like communal toilets, you can see the men all standing in the queue with like a 13-year-old girl in front of them, absolutely mortified.
Yeah, absolutely. And as ever, I'm always struck by the fact that, you know, a set of policies drawn up by Stonewall or the people shouting, you know, some kind of LGBT committee that set itself up at a hospital, NHS trust. Why are you listening to these people? They do not represent the people they claim to speak on behalf of. They certainly don't represent the majority position in the country. They certainly don't represent and reflect how women feel about all of this, which if you look at any poll, it's quite clear that this is a tiny minority of people who believe any of this stuff, let alone the llamas and so on. But I just don't get it. Why would you seek to upset most of the people who work for you, most of your patients, to go along with a few ideologues?
I know, but again, because they're totally signed up to the madness. And again, you're told you're a bigot or a trans woman. You can call me what you want. I don't care. I still refuse to be forced to deny facts. And I say, I'm with J.K. Rowling on this. You know, I'll have the top bunk, please.
And we've got to
simple as that in prison. I'm literally prepared to go to prison for this. This is a hill I am willing to die on.
And we've got to just start laughing at all this stuff even harder than before. The first time this health minister is put before any journalist, the first question they should ask is, OK, so you think people should identify as llamas? What kind of accommodations does that involve? Could you be a llama and non-binary? Just keep pummeling until you get to the end of the conversation.
The only journalists she's going to go in front of are going to be like BBC and Sky, who've signed up to all this madness, along with most other newspapers. And even in this building, Times and the Sun and others, they go along and they do these reports about, you know, a male rapist, sexual assault suspect, and referring to that person because they're suddenly identifying as trans. How convenient when they've been caught for a crime. They refer to them as she and her. And they play along with that, along with the police, along with the court. So there's been some rulings on that may have changed. But, you know, no, stop doing it. Stop doing it. And also, again, trans-identified man. Lots of people think when you talk about trans women, there's been polling, because, people are supporting, trans women are women, all these polls going, They think that because they genuinely believe that someone has, no, they're men. They're men. End of, full stop, nothing to discuss. I just find it extraordinary. But here's the thing, this weirdly links in with another thing I want to talk to you about, and we talked about it in the last hour, about the assisted dying bill. And the reason why I think this links in is, when you've got like the trans issue and the people who are deciding whether or not a child, for instance, should have puberty blockers before they were banned, thank God, or on these boards, or even, and then you get into things like, you know, abortion clinics and things like the people kind of self-select to work in these organisations because this is something they are supporting, they're pro. In the same way, Kim Leadbeater, the Labour MP behind the private members bill for the assisted dying bill, she she is basically one of the big points she made was we will have all these safeguards. So people who are afraid of the assisted dying being, just from people who have only got 6 months to live, being, a slippery slope to pretty much anyone being able to go, I'm 23, I'm a bit unhappy today, I'd like to have assisted dying. And we have seen horrific slippery slopes in many other countries. No, there's going to be this protection. This protection is going to be, we're going to have a High Court judge has to sign off on every one. There's going to be 2 doctors. Now, I've been in favour of assisted dying for well over a decade. I would support this bill in principle, particularly because of those safeguards, but I wanted to see more safeguards to make sure as well. She's now said, well, because everyone's complaining that actually there aren't going to be enough High Court judges, there won't be enough court time, everything would come to a halt, nothing would happen. Well, we'll just get rid of that. We'll just have a panel of people. We'll have someone who's an ex-judge, a barrister. We'll have a psychologist or psychiatrist, and we'll have a social worker on the panel. Exactly the same thing is happening with the trans debate. But the people on that panel will be people who are in favour of assisted dying and therefore are far more likely to give approval in those cases, as opposed to a High Court judge who doesn't get to choose their cases and may or may not have different opinions and will have to judge it on the law. This is the problem, is by definition the people who get to make these decisions, whether it's in a trans clinic like the Tavistock clinic, as it was, whether it's in an NHS trust, whether it's the assisted dying on a panel, if that ever came about, it will be the people who are already signed up in principle to the actual thing. And this is what happens. The people who get involved in every area of this world, people on immigration tribunal panels, the ones who say, yeah, we should definitely allow this paedophile, from Pakistan to stay in this country, story today's news, because it would be harsh on his children if he was forced to leave them. Like, really? Like, the people who sit on those tribunals are by definition people who are kind of signed up to a way of thinking where they're hand-wringing and liberal. And we have just got a whole load of decisions being made in this country by people who are signed up to a way of thinking which is completely alien to the majority of voters. Utterly, utterly alien. Hand-wringing, liberal, no borders, men can become women, they are totally out of touch with ordinary people, and I think that's exactly what's going to happen here. And it's what happened with trans in the NHS, it's what happened in all this, in immigration. You've got a whole load of people who are just signed up to, frankly, let's call it the madness.
And I think that's a really important point. I got there in the end. Someone is not going to go and work for a new... it's effectively we're going to end up creating a kind of assisted dying industry.
Yeah, you're opposed to assisted dying in principle. And you're not going to go and work on that panel, are you?
Absolutely. And in some of the people who were giving evidence before the committee, who do work in this area of... I wouldn't call it healthcare, sort of death care, effectively, in Australia or in America or wherever. They're saying some things that are quite uncomfortable for the pro side of this debate. They're saying, well, people do feel like a burden, but that's their choice. Well, there is these kinds of questions which are floating around this, and I think at the very least, I don't support this bill in practice or in principle, but at the same time, I think they could at least be honest about what it is that they're proposing. The fact that you are talking about people seeking to end their life, the way in which even when in Parliament, Danny Kruger used the word suicide and I got slapped down.
It is suicide.
It absolutely is. At least argue for it on those terms. And also, I would say that whilst I understand the point about safeguards and people saying I would support it, but if your entire discussion about your particular bill, your particular reform, is how you can protect people from its unintended consequence, I think that raises questions about whether or not the reform itself is a good idea.
I really do understand all those concerns. I really do. But I'm in favour in principle. But again, if I were an MP, I would not vote for this bill as it stands right now, and that's been a massive change for me. I'm really shocked by how badly this has been handled. I think Kemble Peter has really done terrible disservice to a cause I feel quite strongly about. But there we are. Let's also talk about something completely different, and that is the Israel-Gaza situation. Trump, again, every day we're just waking up to a new statement from Trump. Trump has spoken out after Hamas said they're going to postpone the latest hostage release due for Saturday. Another 3 hostages being released in return for hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, as usual the case. But he said basically if it was up to him, he'd scrap the deal. He would just scrap the deal, the ceasefire deal as it is. Still in phase 1, negotiations have begun on phase 2, and he said basically that the 33 Israeli hostages still being held by Hamas should be freed by midday on Saturday. He said by 12 o'clock actually, so whether that's noon or midnight, but on Saturday basically. And he said, or he said he would cancel the ceasefire and let all hell break out. Now, I have to say, an awful lot of people are getting to that stage. I strongly suspect there aren't that many hostages who are still alive. But I also understand why Israelis and others are desperate to get back even the bodies, just to know, because Hamas lie. I know it's a shock to everyone that a terrorist organisation that massacres people lies, but they do. And so there are people, you know, it may well be the Beavis kids are alive. There are people who were told that we thought they were dead, and then it turns out they are alive. So I completely understand getting back dead bodies is also important, to know that your family members are no longer still suffering. But I have a feeling that Hamas are kind of running out of people to hand back because of the state they've been keeping people in, as was blatantly borne out on Saturday, the horrific concentration-style appearance of the 3 men who were released, and the final torture. I still can't get over telling a man to say, you know, I'm looking forward to seeing my wife and children when they knew they'd murdered them. I mean, it's just appalling. These people are seriously sick. But you know, Hamas saying that Israel have breached lots of ceasefire deals. Well, yeah, if they have, well, so have Hamas. But at the end of the day, is it tenable for Israel to carry on with this?
Well, I think it's certainly coming up to that point where they're going to have to make a choice. Hamas are not an honest broker in any negotiation. I think that goes without saying.
Also, no, it doesn't. Not here.
I know people think they're like Nelson Mandela, if you listen to some people on these demonstrations.
Freedom fighters.
That was always one of the uncomfortable, as you say, truths of all of this, or unknown questions, which is, do they really know where all the hostages are? Do they actually know that they're dead? I mean, also, some of them are under the guard of other groups, Palestinian Islamic Jihad, other, you know, equally toxic and insane Islamist organisations. That's one thing which, obviously, the desire in Israeli society is to get the hostages home, to just to know as much as anything else. Also, from what you see from the hostages who have been released, the fact that so many of them were willing to say, no, let someone else go ahead of me, shows what horrendous conditions they're staying in and how much guilt would be associated with leaving even one of them behind in that kind of situation. But I dare say that this stalling which is taking place is probably something to do with the fact they either don't know where these hostages are, or few of them are alive and they've been letting on. Yeah, that would be my sense. But again, when the American president talks about all hell breaking out, there are a lot of people just say, just get the hostages out, end of, you know. People talk about, you know, people just want peace. Well, yeah, you know, it doesn't look like Hamas is very big on the peace and the ceasefire, which is what the Palestinians, people in Gaza, are desperately wanting to actually, you know, return to what's left of their homes. And Donald Trump has, you know, really put the cat among the pigeons when he talks about he wants to buy Gaza. I don't know who he's buying it from. But basically saying, and basically removing everybody, insisting, you know, the Jordanians, the Egyptians, the Saudis, you know, take them. Well, hey, you know, Saudi Arabia's got a load of land. I mean, so has America. Move them all to America. I mean, I like that he's calling out the countries that pretend they care about the Palestinian people. Absolutely 100% do not want a single person from Gaza to be turning up on their in their country. I mean, Jordan has already got more than half its population of Palestinians, but again, many different factions and the like. Saudis certainly don't, but these are countries, you know, they've got the money, they've got the space. There's that argument. But I mean, how do you think this is going to get resolved? Because at the end of the day, is the two-state solution is not an option, because none of the organisations on the Palestinian side accept the existence of Israel. None of them. Okay, lots of the other Arab states do. So there isn't a two-state solution. Hamas and the Palestinians, all this, they only really want a one-state solution. That doesn't involve Israel. So there's no way that Israel or any country, if our government would say, we're going to stay where we are, we're going to have Hamas basically, send the diggers in, send the billions in aid in, let's rebuild Gaza with all its tunnels, and let's just wait for the next October the 7th. Are you kidding me? I'd be on the streets fighting against that. How on earth do we expect Israel to put up with that? I just don't see that Benjamin Netanyahu could go through what they've gone through and then allow that to all happen again. So what is the answer? What is it? I mean, it's the most intractable geopolitical question, isn't it? And I do struggle to take Trump's suggestion, blue sky thinking session. It's a bit. It might be more practical than the nonsense everyone's been talking about for the last few years. And of course, you know, the people of Gaza should continue to live there. The point of this conflict, the reason it was ignited in the first place, was because the genocidal lunatics who run that part of the world went to war with Israel and demonstrated to Israel and to the world that they had, I would hope, that they had to be taken out. I saw someone describe it, we've gone from the two-state solution to the real estate solution in Donald Trump's brain. I don't think even he's serious about that. This is a man who struggles with the idea that there should be any American presence even in Europe, let alone in the Gaza Strip. I think it's him trying to sort of shake the snow globe in the hope that to see where things land and to probably put some pressure or to apply some pressure in some way on Hamas and to suggest that to kind of fulfil this sort of madman image almost. That's the only
being
rational
unpredictable.
explanation.
Who knows what I'm going to do? I mean, one of the things I do like is the unequivocal, clear support for Israel. Full stop.
Yeah.
We're on his.
Marco Rubio said
we are on Israel's side. End of. Funnily enough, we're on the side of a democratic nation-state ally as opposed to terrorist murderers. Never thought that was a hard call myself, but there we are. Love to hear your thoughts on that. I love to hear your thoughts on everything we're talking about. You know the number 0344 499 1000. Up next, we'll get some of your calls. Lots coming in about the lunatic health minister, the NHS doctor who doesn't know the difference between a man and a woman biologically. Later in the hour, we are going to be talking to one of the people who is very much supporting the assisted dying bill, to talk to him about whether or not actually the changes that are being made mean that actually is too dangerous. And we'll talk to Tory MP and Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollinrake as well. That's all coming up. This is Talk. We are the home of common sense.
We recently released a report of an individual that we couldn't detain and deport despite him being a career criminal, 15 convictions, because his daughter had gender identity issues. So these are the kind of cases that you hear a lot about whilst you actually study the cases going through the immigration tribunal. And the problem is because these tribunals are staffed and led by left-wing lawyers that have kind of graduated to the position of immigration judge, you know for a fact that the person presiding over these cases is coming at each and every single one with a certain worldview.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, coming up to 11:25. Tom Slater is also with me. Let's get your thoughts, and we'll get his response in just a moment. Basically, we'll ask you, as always, to get in touch on any of the big topics of the day. 0344 499 1000. But in particular, new Labour Health Minister Ashley Dalton saying women can have a penis, people can identify as a llama if they want, and they deserve dignity and respect. I mean, it's absolute madness. Oh, yeah, and an NHS doctor who thinks he's a man, who thinks he's a woman, but apparently doesn't know the difference between biological sex. The thing is, if he doesn't think there's any difference or biology, then then why does he have to identify as a woman? Why can't he just be a man? And if there's no difference, I mean, this is my thing. We just got to the point when men could wear pretty much what they wanted and women could wear what they wanted. We didn't have ideas about, you know, you had to be feminine if you're a woman and you had to be, you know, masculine if you're a man. We got all very relaxed about that. Then we had to blow it all up again. But there we are. Let's go straight to the phone lines. Jackie is in Oldham. Hello, Jackie. Talk some sense to me, Jackie.
Well, trans ideology is categorised as a psychiatric health problem. And we don't affirm people with anorexia, bulimia.
Exactly.
If they say they are fat, we don't affirm to them and say, oh, yes, you are, so they can go on and harm themselves. We don't do that. So people that are saying that you can identify as llamas or, you know, that men can become women, they're not living in reality.
Yeah. We used to call it gender dysphoria, as you say. It was a mental health condition, and treated as such, with sympathy, kindness, but nevertheless, acknowledgement that it wasn't true.
Yeah, I saw your interaction with Dan Hodges on Twitter, and it is not polite. It is not helping anybody to reaffirm something that is not true. Yeah. It is harmful.
Well, exactly. I mean, but it's supposed to be merged, you know, the NHS, you know, money has also been spent removing the healthy breasts of 1,000 women because they believe that they are born in the wrong body and they don't want a female body anymore. 1,000 women having their breasts cut off because of this mad ideology, and we're like going along with it. If someone said, I believe I should only have one leg, we wouldn't go, yeah, absolutely, let's cut off your other leg. We wouldn't do that. It's so absurd and obscene. We would like go, that's crazy. I mean, the doctor would be struck off and probably imprisoned. But we think it's absolutely fine for someone's penis or someone's breast to be cut off. I mean, that's mad.
It is mad. And I think we have to start calling out these people that are mentally unbalanced, that are coming out with these things. Yeah. Because we cannot, you know, it's like a form of cultural Marxism. It's an authoritarian attack on the majority that don't believe in all of this.
Forcing people to pretend to believe something that they don't believe is exactly what they did, you know, Marx. But again, it's like, you know, 2 + 2 = 5. War is peace. True, you know, lies are truth. It is Orwellian, and which is Marxist. Yeah.
Yeah, it is Marxist because if you don't comply, then you're labelled. You're labelled as a transphobe, and it's about controlling the masses. And you know, it's far more sinister. I mean, we've all laughed at a health minister saying you can become a llama, but it's really, really sinister, and people have to start speaking out about it.
Well, yeah, I mean, a lot of people have, and they've had a lot of abuse for it. I completely agree with you, Jackie. Thank you very much indeed on that. Let's go to Linda, who is in Dorset. Linda, you particularly want to talk about this NHS doctor involved in this tribunal because he says he's a woman. He's not. He's a man. Whatever certificate he's got saying he's a woman, he's still a man. But he insists on using a female changing room, and even though he knows because they've told him it makes the women nurses he changes with uncomfortable.
Well, why on earth has it gone to a tribunal? I mean, anybody with half a brain cell knows the answer to this. It shouldn't be in there.
Yeah. I mean, he might feel uncomfortable changing in front of the other men, but you know what? I mean, there's always a toilet cubicle, the disabled loo. We all know that. You know, if you want to change, you know, you go to work and you want to change, you go out to a party. I mean, everyone you use. There's no one disabled in needing the loo. You go to the disabled loo because that's where you can change. You get a bit of privacy. Can't he just do that? No, he wants to force himself on other women.
Did he not go to medical school and do biology and surely he knows the ins and outs of things?
I think he might have missed infant school, love. Because he obviously doesn't understand some really basic stuff.
But is he a real doctor? Does he need to look at his CV to see if he's a real doctor?
Yeah. Oh, no, exactly. I do not want some... Like, if you went to a doctor, you went to a GP and you say, oh, you know, I've got this, you know, ache in my shoulder and I want you to look at it. And that doctor said things like, you know, oh, no, that's not your shoulder, that's, you know, that's your knee. And you go, no, it's my shoulder, doctor. They go, no, that's your knee. There's no difference between a knee or a shoulder. That's your knee, and you know, I'm going to give you a crutch for your knee. You'd be like, this person is stark, staring insane. They should not be practicing. They're a danger to patients, and I'm going to report them. But if it's about trans, then you're the bigot.
Springs to mind some years ago. The Men in White Coats will be coming soon. If you think you're a Zama, or you think you're a man and you're a woman, or a woman...
Yeah. Is there an animal you'd like to identify as?
No, but I'm going to identify as being rich today and go and spend loads of money I haven't got.
Exactly. Yeah, I identify as a size 10, 20-year-old, but you know what? Good luck with that, Julia. Linda, thank you for your call. This is our audience. Come on, Tom. I mean, we all get it. Everyone gets it.
Yeah.
It's no one's being rude. Again, I don't mind if someone wants to dress in clothes which are traditionally, you know, the other sexes, because I couldn't care. I just don't care. But it's when it goes further, and it is, as the callers point out, it is forcing people to pretend they believe in a lie.
Yeah, you're being forced to care, you're being forced to comply, you're being forced to believe absurdities, you're being forced to give up your rights. I mean, why anyone thought that this wasn't going to meet opposition, I don't know. The idea that it's just being kind and it's just like being accepting and tolerant, it's obviously not that. And it's ushering in a tremendous intolerance as well, which is what people, again, don't seem to manage to grasp about this. Absolutely.
11:32 is almost the time. We're going to go to a quick break. Up next, going to talk to Conservative Shadow Housing Secretary Kevin Hollinrake. Plenty more to talk about. Love to get more of your calls on air. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. 11:34 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, and Tom Slater from Spiked Online is still with us. Get your thoughts on what our next guest has to say in a moment. Kevin Hollinrake, Conservative MP, is also shadow levelling up at a housing secretary and joins us right now. Very good morning to you, Kevin.
Good morning, Julia.
Thank you very much indeed. Do you identify as an animal of any sort?
Well, my nickname's Rupert Bear by all my mates, so a bear, I suppose.
Can you explain that nickname?
Well, when I was 11, I was wearing yellow check trousers, and a friend...
And you lived to tell the tale?
I did, but
Wow.
I've never lived down the nickname, I'm afraid. So,
Very good to know. So if he were going to identify them, what do you make of the new Labour Health Minister, Ashley Dalton? She's been appointed. I mean, I'm assuming her pronouns are she and her. She says that she appointed after, of course, we saw her predecessor sacked for messages in his WhatsApp group. She says that women can have a penis and people can identify as a llama if they want, and deserve dignity and respect. Do you agree?
No. I mean, it's just shocking to think this is the party that's governing our country and that you would choose something like that as a government minister. I mean, she's obviously entitled to her views, but to think somehow that resonates with the average person in the street is just beyond me. I mean, it's just completely bonkers and nobody understands it. In my view, Julian, you said many times on this particular subject, this whole debate is being basically stimulated by a very, very small number of activists, and the rest of the public just doesn't get it.
Yeah. I mean, OK, here's the thing. You say she's entitled to believe what she wants. I'm more offended by, and more worried by her having those views than I am by Andrew Gwynn making a glib joke about a 72-year-old voter and telling her to F off over her bins. A horrible message. He lost his job. How can he lose his job for that, but this woman thinks that people can identify as a llama?
Well, I tend to agree with that. Actually, I mean, it's clearly Keir Starmer must have known about her past views, because anybody with access to Google can find out what this member of Parliament
said. It took people on X about 5 minutes.
Yeah, exactly. So it must have been out there. And I've got to say, Julia, as you know, there are lots of people in the Labour Party that have these views as well.
The Prime Minister.
Well, he couldn't say what a woman was, could he, when he was asked? In fact, he basically said that 1 in 1,000 women has a penis. So he clearly has mixed views himself, and he's all over the place on all these policies, of course, Keir Starmer. So, it's the person who believes in nothing will fall for anything, and that's where the Labour Party is. They fall for anything. This is complete nonsense. Of course, anybody supports the principle that anybody should be able to live their life exactly how they choose, as long as they stay within the confines of the law. But that does mean respecting other people's rights. And this is the serious part of this. To think somebody with a penis can go into a women's changing room or a women's toilet is absolutely an abhorrent...
Isn't it weird, though? Because I'm just trying to think who's been in power for the last 14 years, Kevin. We seem to have this conversation every time. Tories like you and Kemi Baden, although she was sound on this, to be fair, as a cabinet minister, you're saying how awful this is, how mad this is. It happened on your watch, and you guys did absolutely bugger all to stop it.
Well, I'm not sure that's right, actually, but Tories like me, if you can
what was wrong about what I said?
Because I was going to go on to say, if you can find any reference to me ever supporting the principle that somebody with a penis can go into women's prison or women's toilets...
Call them what they are. You allowed it to happen while you were in office.
Well, I think we made our mistakes.
That's what I'm saying. You did bugger all to stop it. That's why a lot of people are saying it's a bit rich. You're speaking up now.
I don't think that's right at all. As you just admitted now, Kemi winning her qualities brief did stand up against.
Well, we didn't see a change in the law to stop it. On the contrary, it was happening in schools. It's happening in there are 2 men right now in prisons in England who were put there during the time that the Tories were in power, who are in women's prisons. How's on your watch?
And they've got a piece. It's totally wrong that they should be there. But listen,
on your watch.
There are things we didn't get right. There's no doubt either. I think you'd admit that we stood up against a lot of this stuff. Okay, we could have done more.
No, you didn't. No. I stand up against this, but I've got no power. You were in government. Your lot were in government with a big majority. You don't have to stand up for things. You can change the law and prevent it from happening, and you didn't. You didn't do it.
We should have done that. That's right.
See, so I was right. So what I said was right.
Well, I don't think we did nothing. That's my point.
Do you think this is why an awful lot of people...
We should have done more, you're right.
Do you think this is why an awful lot of people who've actually got, and people like me, got a lot of time for Kemi Baden? I say she stood up on a lot of very good, strong issues, and she spoke out at the time on lots of issues and took a lot of flack for it as well. on not just this, but lots of other issues, that actually that's why they're turning to Reform and not the Tories. That's why Reform not just ahead of Tories in the polls, but coming ahead of Labour in some polls as well, because they know that actually the two major parties virtually the same when it comes to these things. They might say something if it seems unpopular and say they'll do something, but they don't. And that's why we're in the mess we're in on trans, on immigration, on all net zero, all the other mad policies that you guys, both major parties, have pushed, and that actually you might say one thing for an election, but you don't do anything about it. And that's why so many of your voters in July last year went to Reform, and even more of them are doing it now. Isn't that the problem?
There's some truth in what you say. There's no question we made some mistakes in certain areas. I've done it before on your show. I'm not going to do it again, but I can list all the successes we had over the last 14 years. And if you're having a proper balanced conversation, you would concede that.
And there are, yes.
So there are those things. Now, did we make mistakes? Yes, we did, particularly on migration. And of course, it's easy when you've made a mistake, and we could track back and find exactly what the levers we failed to pull on those particular issues. But we probably should have a conversation about going forward, because we've got a new leader now. We're under new leadership, Kemi Badenoch. And the reason I backed Kemi Badenoch, given the other options available, is because I've never known a situation with Kemi, having worked for her in the Department of Business and Trade, where she said one thing and done another. She's always been straight in what she said. So if she says, for example, we're going to keep net migration below X level, whatever that will be, she'll do it. And I think people over time will come to realise that's what Kemi stands for. Now, of course, at the moment, people are annoyed at us for some of the things we got wrong. And also, there's no government around the world that survived all the COVID fallout, including Donald Trump, I hasten to add. So all that kind of stuff, we were past our sell-by date. That was going to happen. What we've got to do now is bring forward policies and get people to trust Kemi that this will be different this time on those key issues that really are important to them and important to me, I hasten to add. So, this is what happened. But when you are challenging us and you're saying Reform, eating our lunch and the rest of it, you're saying you should accept, when you talk about bonkers policies, the fact that Reform have got £140 billion of uncosted, unfunding tax and spending policies in their manifesto. So I hope the next time you've got somebody from Reform on there...
I always challenge all of my guests if I think they're talking nonsense as well, No chance of a pact then for the birds is what Kemi Badenoch has said in the latest.
Absolutely right. We've got a hell of a lot of work to do, and we've got 4.5 years to do it, and we've got somebody have some difficult moments in those 4.5 years, local elections in May, not least. And I'll be there with all the candidates, but it'll be a difficult time for us in May, and maybe the next May too. Over time, I think people will realise that we are the best option. We are a party that can govern, that's got the experience of governing and has made mistakes, but also has had successes. But I believe that we can bring forward policies that people feel need to be introduced in this country, and they are right. Controlling migration, securing the streets, balancing the books, building houses so people can get on the housing ladder, all those, levelling up the country, all those things are policies we will put together that we'll be able to implement. Anybody can stand on the sidelines and criticise. We have been there and know how difficult it is. But I think we can deliver on what we set out.
And I certainly think Labour have been a bit surprised and shocked to discover how difficult it is. I mean, you shadow Angela Rayner. And actually, it's interesting. She's one of the few people, I disagree with her on an awful lot of things, but at least, looking at building housing, getting some of the planning dealt with, which you guys weren't able to do or chose not to do, that would be a good thing. Can I ask you, are you comfortable about MPs getting an above-inflation pay rise this year to have an annual salary of almost £94,000? There's a 2.8% pay rise. That's above inflation of just under £94,000. I realise that MPs you don't vote for your own pay. You don't set your own pay. It's done by Senior Salaries Review Board. But are you comfortable when there are so many people who are struggling right now to get that pay rise?
Well, I say this. I mean, before I entered politics, I earned a lot more money. I had my own business. I built up from scratch. And so I'm not in this for the money, is the principal thing. So And in many ways, I don't need the money, so I don't care what the pay rise is. And if it was a pay cut, I would accept that, whatever it is. But I can't speak for every different member of Parliament, but it is independently set. So that's not really something
but
that...
most people do need the money. Most people, and it's all very well. We can have, like, you know, Rishi Sunak in the past or others, you know, very, very wealthy people who, you know, Boris Johnson, I mean, it never seemed to manage his money, but actually has earned, you know, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of pounds. Most people could never dream of earning that. I mean, £94,000 is give or take around 3 times what the average earnings are in this country. I've got no problem with MPs being well paid, but a pay rise at a time when lots of people are really struggling and their wages are being eaten away by policies previously and under the Labour government. Do you feel comfortable with that?
Well, to be honest, yes, I do. I mean, I say I'm not in it for the money. I could earn a lot more in the private sector. But if you want good people to come forward, you've got to pay them a going rate to do the job. Our salaries are not out of sync with salaries for MPs around the world. In fact, they're lower than many jurisdictions. So, listen, I mean, what the independent pay body, I don't know why they chose a 2.8% pay increase. I think that's probably about what average pay increases are in the public sector. It might even be private sector. It might even be a little bit below that. But I don't care about the money. But I do care that some people do need to earn a decent amount of money to do this job, and they should be paid a fair rate to do it.
Okay.
I'm going to come back to you on something else.
Very quickly, yeah.
You cannot say we failed on housing. That is just totally wrong.
Did you build all the houses you'd promised to build?
Yes, we did. Record numbers of housing. Over the last decade, the highest level of house building in 50 years of net housing.
You didn't hit your targets?
Yes, we did. 1 million in the last Parliament. That's exactly what we did.
I don't believe you did hit your targets, but you actually talked about houses that are actually there for people to live in.
Yes, that's right. Net housing formations, 1 million delivered in the last Parliament. That's exactly what we set out to do, exactly what we did.
Oh, I will query that. If I'm wrong, then I'm wrong. I'll send you an apology. Can I ask you, just finally, Gen Z, I hate this generation nonsense, people aged between 18 and 27. So basically, young adults. A new survey has shown there is a deep generational divide in our country. Half of them believe the country is racist, and just 1 in 10 of them would be willing to fight for Britain if we were at war. Why do you think so many young people hate and are ashamed of their country?
There's an old proverb that goes something like this: if you don't welcome young people into the village, they will burn it down just to feel its warmth. And I think we can't talk about a free market system, capitalism, if people don't know how they can accumulate capital. We've got to make it easier for people.
Can you talk in English? You mean buy their own home, get a good job?
Start their own business, save, get a good job, all those things, level up the country, all those kind of things are tied to that, a number of which lie in my portfolios, which I'm very pleased about, because we do want to bring a really good offer in for people to buy their home.
Okay.
We've seen typically socialist Labour reduce every single incentive for first-time buyers to get on the housing ladder. They've increased stamp duty, cut right to buy, cut help to buy, reduced the number of affordable homes to purchase. They are pulling the rug from underneath the feet of first-time buyers, and will become once again the party of home ownership.
OK, really good to talk to you. Covered a lot of ground there. Kevin Hollingray, Conservative Shadow Housing and Levelling Up Secretary. Thank you very much, Steve, for that. We've got to go to a break very soon, but quick word from Tom Slater.
I think they're always going to be on the defensive, aren't they, when people could just point to how much of a Horlicks they made over the past 14 years. I get that there'll be specific things that they'll be able to say, actually, we deserve a bit more credit.
You just can't accept something, they're making a trouble mess. But no, come on, most of the problems are of Tory making. No, and yes, that Tory party went through many different manifestations over those 14 years, but that you can't expect voters to accept that as an explanation. No, absolutely. Take a quick break. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. 0344 499 1000. Up next, we are going to be talking about assisted dying bill. It's one that I would have supported in principle. Now, given the changes that have been made and the safeguards of our High Court judge having the final say in the I would now vote against that bill if it was up to me. We're going to talk to someone still defending that bill up next. This is Talk.
The truth is that Britain was founded on anti-black racism. It's like, hang on, do you think that sorry, people from sub-Saharan Africa built Hadrian's Wall, or that Hengist and Horsa were from North Africa when they came over and purchased the UK? Yes. She's learned American talking points after 2020 and is importing them over here. George Floyd, again, there's irregularities about the judgment there, but we didn't examine the fact that there was a massive race riot that happened in America. Very few people were prosecuted for that. Our Prime Minister still took the knee. We still revolutionised the education system to emphasise anti-black racism and all this sort of stuff.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning, this is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next guest and talk about the assisted dying bill. It's going through its committee stage in the House of Commons after being voted for as a private member's bill brought in by Labour MP Kim Leadbeater. And big changes have been made. Let's talk about those with Trevor Moore. He's a board member and former chair of the organisation, campaign group My Death, My Decision, who've been advocating for the introduction of assisted dying for terminally ill people in England and Wales. Good morning to you, Trevor.
Good morning, and thanks for inviting me.
Thank you so much for joining us. Now, look, I've been a long-time supporter of assisted dying. I'd like the bill to go further, in that not just people who are terminally ill, but also people in unbearable physical pain due to long-term illness or injury that I felt that their life was unbearable. I think it's a fundamental human right. I now, though, would not support this bill because so many of the safeguards that were originally in the bill, particularly a judge, a High Court judge, giving the finest jurisdiction over whether or not someone could be given access to assisted dying. That's being taken away, given to a panel with a KC or a former judge, a psychiatrist and a social worker. And this has just been taken out of the bill by Kim Leadbeater, the MP behind it, and major other changes as well. Do you still support the bill without that crucial safeguard?
Well, absolutely, given the alternative that's been suggested. But just to put this in context a bit, we would have been unique in the world in requiring a High Court order for an assisted dying law. No other jurisdiction requires that. And if we look at Australia, which is probably the most closely modelled version of Kim's bill, there is no requirement beyond the two unrelated, unconnected doctors signing off with the ability to refer to a psychiatrist.
But that's been the worry for a lot of people. I said even people like me who've been long-time supporters of this, is that you do need safeguards against people being pressured either financially or emotionally by other family members, or a lack of care they've got on their own to choosing assisted dying, where it's kind of a gun to your head assisted dying. We wanted to prevent, did we not, the slippery slope, so that the people who do get this are people who genuinely, of their own volition, want it. And we've seen the slippery slope in American states, in many of the countries that brought this in, and in Australia, where more and more people, younger people, people who could actually have alternative choices, are choosing the assisted dying route, but often because there aren't any other options for them.
Well, we could have a debate about whether the slippery slope, as you call it, has occurred in other countries.
Well, it has.
But let's focus on this bill. Kim isn't suggesting there wouldn't be a third tier of approval. It would come via a tribunal, which is analogous to what they've been doing in Spain. And you describe it as if this is the law that will be brought in, but let's remember this is at committee stage. It will come back to Parliament, and MPs who feel strongly about this will have the ability to understand what the alternative is and decide whether they still support it.
But a number of MPs, I mean dozens, we think up to 60 MPs actually, when they voted for this bill, voted for it, made it clear in the long debate about, well, not long, as long as many other debates, but hours of debate, that actually one of the key things for them was this extra safeguard of a judge. Now, now are being involved. Now, we know there's a practical issue here, which is that, we don't have enough High Court judges, don't have enough time in courts. There'll be numerous cases coming forward, particularly at the very beginning, and the court system would be overwhelmed, and it just wouldn't work. So there needs to be some alternative. But is the alternative just, we'll just completely drop this safeguard as well? Given that the people who are likely to be on a panel to decide on this are going to be pro-assisted dying. You're not going to be absolutely philosophically opposed to assisted dying, as many people are, and then go, yeah, but I'm going to go on a panel to assess people whether they're going to be enabled to assisted to die. It's going to be self-selecting, isn't it? So by definition, there's going to be a bias towards, we'll sign off assisted dying.
I think that's slightly denigrating the professionals who would be involved.
Is it?
But let's remind ourselves, this isn't about whether someone should be allowed an assisted death as an ideological matter. This is about whether this individual, after what we've counted as 8 checks on the way to this tribunal for coercion and pressure and so on, we already allow people to make choices about their medical treatment.
Yes.
I can insist on having a ventilator removed. I can say I don't want the next round of chemotherapy, and the doctors have to assess at that point whether they think I've got capacity, whether the family said to me, oh, go on, Dad, you don't want the next round of chemo, do you? I mean, it arises in medical situations already, and I do think that you talk as if there won't be a third tier. There will be a third tier.
I'm just not sure I trust that third tier. I understand all of those points, and we know that people do commit suicide, and there are times when people, and again, the reason I support assisted suicide is I think there are times when it is the best option for people who cannot be, they've an unbearable pain. It's not a quality of life that they choose. I fundamentally believe we should be able to decide our future like that. But when the state is getting involved in assisting people to kill themselves, that is a very different thing, and that's where you need to have those safeguards. I'm all in favour of this bill, a bill going through, but this doesn't cut it anymore.
Well, I'd like to persuade you that when you learn the full detail of what this tribunal will entail, that you might change your mind. But that's the important thing, that I would encourage MPs to be open-minded about this alternative. You spoke of it as if it was being swept away completely. This is a replacement. And as I say, in Spain, they already have this system, a tribunal. And what's more, it's actually localized as well, which makes it much better and more personal. We're talking about people who are dying here. And I think that, if I may say so, some opponents sort of talk about what they'll do to people and what we can do to people, and forget the fact that at the heart of this lie people who are suffering unbearably. The practicalities of them having to appear before a panel, for example, have yet to be addressed, as far as I can see.
Okay. Well, there's no much more. I'm sure, again, it's going to run and run this debate, I think. Trevor Moore, appreciate you joining us. Hope you'll join us again. He's former chair of My Death, My Decision campaign group. Tom Slater, a brief word from you.
I just address this idea that there is no slippery slope. Canada, in the space of 10 years, went from a bill very similar like this in terms of the amount of people who would fall into its jurisdiction to now talking about extending MAID, as they call it, to people who just have mental health problems. Everywhere it's been tried, more or less, the slippery slope has proven itself to be very real, and I just wish advocates would accept that that was the case.
In some countries, like 5% of deaths are assisted suicide.
It
and again, I say this as someone who's in favour of assisted suicide. I would like the right myself, and I certainly want the right, and I want to extend it to people who are unbearable
but let's have a sort of honest debate about it, I suppose.
And it needs to be open and honest, exactly, and that's crucial. Lots more coming up. Do stay tuned. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. I told you at the beginning of the show, didn't I, that this is going to be a packed show. We are racing to get in everything. These adverts and news breaks, they keep getting in the way. Guests sometimes as well, but trying to get to as much as we can. Always so much to talk about. I'm with you all the way till 1 o'clock. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, and he's here as well. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, your connected device, it's great to have you join us. And great to get your calls on air as well. I still want to hear from you about this new Labour Health Minister, Ashley Dalton. She says, again, I'm assuming her pronouns, it's probably illegal now. She says that women can have a penis, yeah, so if a man says he's a woman, he's a trans woman, then he's, you know, whether he's got his dangly bits or not, he's a woman. The Prime Minister also thinks this, by the way. That's how mad our world is. She also says people can identify as a llama if they want, deserve to be treated with dignity and respect. I mean, as one of our callers pointed out earlier, they need to be treated. But probably by the men in white coats. What is your reaction? I'd love to hear your thoughts, because I do think this stuff is indicative of how mad we are. And if you live in a country, and we live in the Western civilization, where this sort of madness is indulged and encouraged, I think we're going down a really slippery slope. We wonder why, you know, countries like, you know, China are zooming ahead, you know, technologically and the like. You know, maybe we should concentrate on a few facts over people's mad lunatic ideas. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Text on that word talk, then your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost 1, standard network rate message. Plenty more to be talking about in this hour, including Donald Trump warning Hamas to release the remaining hostages, all of them, not just the 3 that were scheduled for release this Saturday, by 12 on Saturday, or he will cancel the ceasefire and all hell would break out. This comes after Hamas refused to release the final 33 hostages, basically said that everything was on pause. They accused Israel of violating the terms of their ceasefire agreement. We're still in phase 1, bear in mind. Also, Tory leader Kemi Badenoch dismissing the idea of an electoral pact with Reform UK as for the birds, saying there will be no deal. She says it would drive away Tory voters. Also going to talk more about immigration, as a Pakistani father who was jailed for child sex offences here in the UK escaped deportation because, I kid you not, the Immigration Tribunal ruled that it would be unduly harsh on his young children, despite being banned from living with his children on account of being a paedophile, after he was convicted of child sex offences against 3 girls. Absolutely extraordinary. Also, half of Gen Z, that's 18 to 27-year-olds, basically young adults, half of them believe that Britain is racist, and only 1 in 10 say they would be willing to fight a war for their country. What on earth is going on? What on earth are they being taught in their schools and universities? I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Let's talk, first of all, though, about where we are with Gaza. Tom Slater is still with me. Before we go to our first guest on this, I mean, whenever Donald Trump makes a statement on Gaza, I mean, you know, wow, cat among the pigeons. He's made it very, very clear. His Secretary of State, everyone else, made it very clear he's on Israel's side. There's no question at all. He's not going, on the other hand, on the one hand. But his solution, he's been telling us for the last couple of weeks, for Gaza is to basically remove everyone, all the best part of 2 million population of Palestinians, remove them somewhere else. He said Jordan, Egypt. Now he's suggesting Saudi Arabia because, quote, they have a lot of land. And remove them. He'd said permanently. His press secretary said temporarily. He's saying permanently again. He wants to buy Gaza, real estate, Trump casinos, Trump hotels, goodness knows what, but make wonderful, beautiful homes for people of Gaza elsewhere. They wouldn't be allowed back. They wouldn't want to come back. Their homes would be so beautiful and lovely, he says. Last night, after we saw Hamas basically say, we're going to pause the ceasefire deal, we're not going to release any more hostages, the 3 that are due on Saturday, Donald Trump said that if it was up to him, he said it was up to Israel, but for him, 12 o'clock on Saturday, he didn't specify midday or midnight, I'm assuming midday, if all the hostages, all of them were not released, then he said all hell will break out. What do you make of that, and does that help or hinder where we are?
Well, I think he's been adopting what you might call the sort of fire and fury rhetorical playbook again. He tried that with North Korea, and this time around I think he's trying to use it to solve the not necessarily the Middle East, but arguably the world's most intractable dispute. It's something which I struggle to see beyond the theatrics sometimes. I mean, I understand the concern and the debate generated by his suggestion that the way to solve the question of Gaza is to turn it into a giant golf resort or what have you. I struggle to believe that's a serious proposal. This is a president who was put in power by a lot of people who were frustrated by the expenditure of American blood and treasure to the ends of involving yourself in parts of the world that most Americans would prefer that America stayed out of. So with all of that in mind, I struggle to see this as a serious proposal. I think, is it an attempt to just kind of very roughly move the dial in Israel's favour to put pressure on Hamas? Potentially, I'm not entirely clear if that's working.
The uncertainty itself.
Yeah, the sort of madman theory explanation that Trump, because he's so erratic, that if he leans into that, that might help stiffen some people's resolve and keep them guessing as to what America might do, or in essence kind of allow Israel to do as they would see it. On its own terms, I struggle to see it as a serious proposal, but I think it's an indication of how fraught things remain, and that whilst many people were seeing that ceasefire deal and acting as if this was going to be even a medium-term solution, I think the smart money was on it always breaking down, partly because Hamas are very dishonest brokers, but also because at the end of the day, Israel has an interest in not just letting Hamas stay in power, which is what that
they've made it very clear
that
cannot be the end result. Well, let's talk to my next guest about this. Is journalist Yvonne Ridley. You'll remember Yvonne Ridley was captured by the Taliban in Afghanistan in 2001, just before the attacks on Afghanistan by the coalition forces. She was held captive for 11 days while working for the Sunday Express. She and I were colleagues then and are friends still, and she is a vocal supporter of the Palestinian cause. Very good afternoon to you, Yvonne.
Good afternoon, Julia.
It's going to start nice and friendly. I have a horrible feeling it's not going to end that way, Yvonne. I suppose first of all, before we get into the ceasefire deal and what Trump said and what Hamas have said, when you saw the state of the 3 Israeli hostages who were released on Saturday, who have said they've been beaten and tortured, starved within an inch of their lives, coming out looking like they've been in Belsen, or Auschwitz, the state of them, so skinny and wretched. And they said they've been held in tunnels underground the entire time, living on a pita bread, every couple of days, and the like. When you've seen the state of the female hostages who, when they were released, being forced to parade in front of baying men, does that in any way make you question your support for the Palestinian cause?
No, because I had seen the pictures of hundreds of Palestinian prisoners, political prisoners, who were in a worse state. The majority of those released by Israel are still in hospital. They had signs of torture, abuse. They were skeletal, as though they'd just walked out of Belsen. And so, I saw the 3 Israeli hostages. I did feel for them. Their bodies spoke volumes. And
what did they speak to you? What volumes did they speak to you? That they'd been tortured by Hamas, the ruling governing organisation of Palestinian people in Gaza?
Well, to tell the truth, Julia, I didn't read that many stories from the Israeli hostages.
How convenient.
Yes, probably very much in the same way as you didn't look at all the images.
Oh no, I did. Oh no, I get sent them. Don't you worry. I'm telling you, the majority of Palestinian prisoners being released are not still being treated in hospital. They may not be living back with their families, but they're not being treated in hospital. The vast majority of them did not come out skinny. We saw them waving from buses. They did not like that. So one of the pictures that's doing the rounds of someone who supposedly looks as skeletal as the hostages who were released on Saturday is actually a cancer patient. He's been receiving care in an Israeli hospital. That's the reason why he's skinny. It's not because he's been starved in a tunnel as a hostage. You also say these are political prisoners. Actually, the vast majority of these people have been convicted of serious crimes. Some are serving long, life sentences for mass murder and organising terrorist attacks on buses for the children. So they're not political prisoners.
They've been held on administrative detention.
Some have been, yes, and actually pretty much every country in a war zone does do that. Yes, they do. The vast majority of those released have been convicted in a court of serious crimes. I know, I mean, I'm sorry to mention facts, Yvonne, but that is the case.
Well, I saw people in wheelchairs.
Oh, well, in that case.
And, you know, we can only report on what we see because...
Yes, we can. We can only report on what we see. And a lot of what we see and the information we get out of what happens in Gaza comes from and is controlled by Hamas, a mass murdering, raping, brutal, torturing, hostage-taking terrorist organisation. Yvonne, you're a journalist, I'm a journalist. Since when do we take the word of terrorists?
Julia.
Huh?
None of their leaders, well, there was one who's now dead, are facing charges at the ICC for war crimes.
Oh, well, in that case, they must not have done anything wrong.
No, but they have been charged.
Yvonne, let's talk about the ceasefire. Let's talk about the deal. Hamas say they're not going to release the next 3 hostages. Do you think that's because they genuinely feel that the ceasefire terms have been broken by Israel unfairly, or have they run out of hostages in a fit state to be released, or indeed alive hostages?
No, not at all. The ceasefire has been broken. A Palestinian child was shot in Rafah a few days ago. So
why was that?
And this
why was that? Was there a large group of Palestinians approaching IDF soldiers who'd repeatedly told them to get back?
Well, live rounds on a child. You know, this is the most...
How old was the child?
...army in the world.
We're often told children, aren't we? Often we mean 17-year-old young men.
What is the problem with the understanding ceasefire? What does ceasefire mean? You know, and the aid still isn't getting through.
But
now
again, not true. Huge amounts of aid has got into Gaza. Many international aid. It's not me saying it. International aid agencies, the ones that were criticising Israel for not letting aid through, are saying the aid is getting through. But you know different.
All the aid is getting through, and this is an area where I do have an ear on the ground.
I know, you were part of an aid convoy many years back, yeah.
And the aid is not getting in.
Not getting in. So the aid agencies are lying?
Well, the aid agencies might be speaking for individual charities, but I know that there is a shortage. They're supposed to have, is it 600 aid lorries going through a day? And it is still far short of that.
I believe you to be completely and utterly factually wrong on that, Yvonne. But I don't know, maybe that's what the Hamas are claiming, and I'm sure obviously what they're saying is true. But I think the aid agencies who've been bringing the aid in and who've been repeatedly critical of Israel, so I don't think they're big, you know, they're not, you know, Zio organisations, as many on your side would argue. If they say the aid is getting in, the aid is getting in. It probably isn't as much aid as you want or as Hamas wants. I mean, Hamas haven't been able to rebuild their tunnels just yet and then build the hospitals and the schools and the apartment blocks and children's bedrooms on top of those Hamas tunnel entrances. So maybe there's not enough aid getting in for what they would like. That doesn't mean enough aid isn't getting in. When I see pictures from Gaza now, I'm not seeing starving people.
Are you disappointed?
You think I wanted the people of Gaza to starve?
No, I don't think you do, Julia. But
so why did you ask that question, Yvonne?
Because
Hamas are quite happy for the people of Gaza to starve. Hamas are quite happy for the people of Gaza to be bombed. They had room in those tunnels for every single innocent woman and child, a Palestinian child in Gaza, to hide in those tunnels with them, their camouflage, their nice shiny boots, their nice shiny guns that suddenly came out when they started releasing hostages. They had plenty of space. They didn't let a single one in, though, did they? Apart from their own children. Why not? When those bombs were falling from the IDF, because they didn't care about the Palestinian children and innocents.
It's not that they didn't care about the Palestinian children. You know, the reality is more than half the population are children,
yes,
are in their teens, a very young population. Yes. And Gaza is such a tight strip You can't hide everybody or put everybody in a safe space, which is why.
I mean, you might have put the kids in at least. You might have put the kids in at least, because you're so worried. Your side is so worried about Palestinian children. You're quite happy to still basically support an organisation being in charge that deliberately provoked an action from IDF. No, there can't be anyone sane who thinks that Hamas committing the awful massacre, I mean, God, please, God, you accept there was a massacre on October the 7th, would think that Israel would go, oh, fair enough then, as we carry on, let's carry on. They took hostages because they wanted to use hostages, including babies, so that they could try and negotiate.
Of a brutal occupation. In men, women and children are being tortured. Just yesterday near Jenin, a woman and her baby died at an Israeli checkpoint because they wouldn't let an ambulance through after they'd shot her in the back. Okay. Now, the safest place for a baby is supposed to be a mother's womb, but it isn't in Israel. And these sort of atrocities are happening daily, and it's bound to have.
I don't think that in war that every single act carried out by every soldier or every decision is the right decision, because it never is, and it won't be when Britain or America or any of our allies go to war either. But here's the thing. I mean, you say this brutal occupation. I mean, let's not go through the whole of the last, goodness me, 75 years, but am I not right in thinking that Israeli forces had withdrawn from Gaza 2005, was it? So where was that occupation?
The occupation isn't just a physical occupation. Oh. It's the land, the air, the sea, which is controlled
Stopping aid coming in so they could build more tunnels and get more weaponry so they could attack Israel.
You're just repeating Israeli propaganda.
Am I? Oh, it's funny, because I thought you were just repeating Hamas propaganda.
On fact and detail.
Sorry. Billions and billions has gone in to Gaza over the last 20 years, and it has been almost entirely spent by Hamas on weaponry, on bombs, on building tunnels and enriching themselves. It has not been spent on the people of Gaza. Let me talk about Donald Trump's latest idea.
I wouldn't say enriching themselves, Julia, because I don't see anybody.
The Hamas leadership live in lovely houses in Qatar.
Well, they're there as guests of one of the richest ruling families.
How lovely for them. Yes, lovely for them. Let's go back to what Hamas has said. They believe that terms of the ceasefire have been breached. They're not going to release any more hostages. Donald Trump has said all the hostages out by 12 on Saturday. We think he means midday. All the hostages, not just the next 3, all the hostages out, or all hell breaks loose. He said that's what he would do. He's been backing Israel. Do you think that would focus minds? I mean, there's no reason why Hamas couldn't release all of the hostages on Saturday, could there? I mean, all of them. Is there any argument that you, as someone who desperately cares about innocent people, those hostages are innocent people, are they not? Is there any reason why Hamas couldn't and shouldn't release them all?
Once the hostages go, and every act of kindness that has been shown to Israel has just been backlash.
Sorry? Every act of kindness?
Yes.
Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Every act of... What were the acts... Do tell me what the acts of kindness were. The pita bread once every 3 days for those men kept in a tunnel for 16 months? How generous, how kind.
And you're focusing on the 3 men.
Oh, silly me.
If we look at the women.
Oh, you're going to go there. You're going to go there. Didn't they look well and healthy, Yvonne? Didn't they look well? They must have had a wonderful time at that holiday camp that Hamas ran for them for the last 16 months. When you were held captive, when you were held hostage by the Taliban, you were fed. You had cigarettes. You were looked after. You weren't in fear for your life. Those women, those men, the children, the elderly, the sick, they lived every day.
I would be in an Israeli prison, that's for sure.
Absolute abject nonsense.
We've had a doctor who was raped to death, and then the Israelis called it self-defense. When did rape become self-defense?
Well, yeah, you tell me. Let's ask your friends in Hamas, Yvonne. I'm not saying there aren't atrocities committed by some Israeli forces, and some of them end up in court, and rightly so, and they should all end up in court. I'm not defending any atrocities that are committed by any side. I want to know, what were the acts of kindness that Hamas did that have been thrown back in their face by Israel? What were those acts of kindness?
Well, they gave them goodie bags. I don't know what was in them, but they gave them gifts. They gave them little mementos, Palestinian mementos.
The acts of kindness from your hostage taker, from the man who's kidnapped you and terrified you and starved you for months. Yvonne, what's happened to you? What has happened to you?
What's happened to me, Julia, I have watched day in, day out pictures of children being blown to shreds.
Do you know who put those
by
out?
American and British bombs. I have watched war crimes being committed.
You know who put that? You know who puts those images out? Hamas. You know why we never see images of Hamas fighters being blown up? Because Hamas don't allow those out. Who put those children? Who put those innocent people in harm's way? Hamas.
Oh, that's ridiculous, Julia.
That's ridiculous. They went into Israel to massacre innocent people and they took hostages. Were they surprised that Israel struck back and wanted their hostages back? No, of course they weren't. They knew what would happen. They brought down that. How should Israel have responded to that massacre? What would have been acceptable to you for Israel to have done to get their people back and to protect their country? What would be acceptable to you, given all those acts of kindness by Hamas?
The first thing that I would do is, how the hell did this happen when we have the fourth largest army?
All questions that there's going to be an inquiry. What would have been acceptable to you for Israel to have done? Given that you think everything they've done is a war crime, what would have been acceptable? Answer the question.
What would have been acceptable is to sit back first, ignore the impulse for knee-jerk reactions.
It was 2 weeks before they went in.
And say, why did this happen?
It was 2 weeks before they went in. That's not impulse. They know why it happened. We know why it happened. It happened because the leaders of Hamas...
Are you going to go back to...
It's a terrorist organisation whose constitution is the destruction of Israel. That's why it happened. Israel's existence is a provocation to Hamas. That's why it happened.
Where did the constitution come from?
OK, so what would have been the acceptable response from Israel? What could they have done? What could they have done that would be acceptable to you, Hamas apologist? What would be acceptable to you?
I'm not a Hamas apologist.
You've talked about their acts of kindness, giving goodie bags to the women who've been held captive in tunnels and starved. I think that makes you a Hamas apologist, Yvonne.
What would have been acceptable to me as a civilised human being who doesn't believe in striking back?
No, of course not.
I would sit back and say, why did this happen?
And then what action?
Why did this happen?
What action? You've said that bit. What action? What would be acceptable action, if any?
Well, the first thing I'd do is interview the Israeli female soldiers who said we tried to raise the alarm, but nobody...
No, you haven't. No, you're not answering my question. What would be... Seriously, last chance. What would be the acceptable action from a nation state invaded by a terrorist organisation who raped and murdered, massacred, took hostages? What would be an acceptable reaction? If that happened to us here in the UK, what would be an acceptable reaction? Bearing in mind you're territorial army trained, Yvonne. What?
You didn't mention the 40 beheaded babies, Julia.
No, because that didn't happen. No, because it didn't happen. It was never claimed by the Israeli officials that it did. It was a miscommunication between a journalist and I've never claimed that because it didn't happen. I don't have to make up lies about the atrocities committed by Hamas because there's enough truth and facts which are completely verifiable. Why won't you answer the question?
I've told you I would sit back.
I asked what action. They're sitting back. They're asking questions. What action would Israel have been allowed to take in your civilised worldview in response to October the 7th? Answer the question, please.
To go down a legal channel. Down a legal route.
Yeah. OK. Yvonne, I genuinely, I absolutely despair what has become of you and your sense of morality, and the fact that you've talked about the acts of kindness and the goodie bags to the hostages blows my mind. It really does. I mean, we've been friends for a long time, but
I've seen too much.
Shame on you. Shame on you. Give you the final word. Go on.
Of mass graves of torture, of babies torn to shreds by British bombs as well as American bombs.
Yeah. Okay. Yvonne, I'm ever so sorry. They're telling me, Maya, we've gone way over time, but I wanted to give you enough rope to hang yourself. Let's be honest, this is where your viewpoint is. 12:27 is the time. We're going to take a break. I think we all need one after that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
I think the increase in ethnic diversity among Gen Z has caused this split. I mean, you say, for example, Stonewall lobbying for the ability for gay people to go about their daily business and not be attacked, right? If you then import a large diaspora of Muslims, second and third generation, according to Henry Jackson Society polling, are more likely to be intolerant, even if they're university educated, then you've increased that level of homophobia or intolerance or illiberalism, and
yet the same group of people support both.
Exactly. So you're almost engineering your own crisis.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. 12:30 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is the home of common sense, not necessarily from all of our guests. I'm genuinely blown away by Yvonne Ridley. It's very difficult things. You know someone for years. I don't break up friendships because people's viewpoints on major political issues. I've never, I just don't know. That's just weird. I think, oh my God, we'll go hammer and tongs. We'll do that off air, we'll do it on air. But, oh God, I'm troubled by a lot of things Yvonne Ridley has just said. Particularly, God, it's the abject lies, just the nonsense that people are spouting after seeing Hamas propaganda online. And I'm not believing everything Israel says, and I'm not, but people taking a terrorist organisation over the evidence of their own eyes, Tom Slater, is quite terrifying.
It is. I mean, I haven't got much to say in addition to the deserved sort of filleting you gave poor old Yvonne there. And with respect to her, I think she's just tumbled down, as many people have, a sort of anti-Israel rabbit hole where up is down, and there's no... it's difficult because of the fact that I think in certain segments of society, certain sections of politics and journalism, the Hamas propaganda is just sort of won out. These people might not see it that way, but the information coming out of Gaza is incredibly tightly controlled
by Hamas.
And as a consequence of that, you see even obviously absurd things kind of start to become good coin, like one of which is this idea that the hostages were actually well treated, in Yvonne's words, that were given acts of kindness. You cannot for a second take that seriously, just because of the fact that they hold this disgraceful stunt when they release those female hostages, where they have their little goodie bags and all the rest of it. You actually see a balaclavaed Hamas videographer walking around and filming them with a nice SLR camera.
And then she goes, making them wave.
Making them hold the things up the right way around after the ordeal that they've just gone through. If you take a step back for a moment, it's clear what a grotesque spectacle that is, but people will see that presented and say, oh, that shows that they were wonderfully treated. Yeah. You are a citizen of a country which this terrorist group wants to see destroyed. They see you as basically worse than scum. The idea that they are going to have in anything resembling a nice time during more than a year of captivity
we
is
know
obviously nonsense.
that men and female captives have been brutally treated and brutally raped. We do know that. We know tortured, beaten, starved. Those women, we understand, were actually starved for many, many months, but then they're given food before, and even drugs before they're released. Yeah. I mean, they didn't bother with the men, and they've had some washback on that. I mean, I'm honestly, it's not often I'm almost speechless, or actually speechless, but I really am on this. Let's go to the phone lines now. We've got lots of your phone calls were coming in about people identifying as llamas and the health minister, but a few calls have come in, understandably, about the conversation we've just had. Let's go to Syed, who's in London. Hi, Syed.
Hi there. Look, I'm sort of calling more because I'm very worried about the possibility of a breakdown of the ceasefire, that hostages, which are being held for years, but on both sides.
No. Israel doesn't hold hostages. They have detainees and they have prisoners. They don't have hostages.
Julia, there are people.
Words have meanings.
Children. Excuse me. They are literally children.
Some of them are children. Yeah, the people who've thrown stones
Please let me speak. Please let me speak. You've been talking.
Well, you can't spout lies on my show.
No, I'm not. Okay, they have been children who've been arrested, who have been convicted without any lawyer or any adult present. This would be a kangaroo court in any other place, but you support it. So I'm not going to.
No, I don't. No, I'm just saying there are some detainees, yes, and there are, and this actually happens remarkably often in the Arab world, but no one seems to have an issue with anyone's doing it. I've said very clearly, I don't support everything that Israel does.
Israel. So you need to defend Israel. I'm not here.
No, I don't need to defend Israel. I don't defend. I defend right from wrong. I don't defend everything Israel does, and I say that very clearly.
Treating children to a law court without an adult or a lawyer present is a disgraceful behavior.
It is disgraceful. Not as disgraceful as massacring them, raping them, or putting them in a tunnel. It just isn't. But you're worried that the ceasefire is going to break down. But who's breaking down the ceasefire? It's Hamas, isn't it?
Sorry?
It's Hamas who's broken the ceasefire.
There are instances of rape and torture in Israeli prisons that have been documented, but you and the Western press have no interest in covering them.
No.
You don't have any interest in
any mistreatment should go before the courts, and often these cases do go before the courts. I asked you the question. It's Hamas who's broken the ceasefire, though, isn't it? They're saying they're not going to release hostages.
I am saying that if the President of the United States comes on TV repeatedly and talks about ethnic cleansing of Gaza, that will have an impact on how Hamas behaves with the hostages.
No, okay, Saeed, I'm going to have to leave it there. I've got to squeeze in one more call before we've got to go to break. We're running so late. Dave is in Essex. Dave, I've just got about a minute. I wanted to get you on air. Good morning, afternoon to you, Dave.
Oh, hi.
Hello.
Sorry.
What do you want to say, my love?
I think Donald Trump is trying to emulate Theodore Herzl when Theodore Herzl is the high priest of Zionism. He travelled over to see the Grand Mufti in back in the day, and made a proposal to the Mufti to buy Palestine. And the Mufti kind of said, well, no, because the Muslim world is never going to agree to this.
OK, I don't think we can do full-on history, by the way, if that's all right. Do you think that Donald Trump, what he's doing, is good or bad? Do you think it's going to have a good or a bad impact?
I think it's going to be good because he's trying to make Palestine an American protectorate so that they have, you know, the arm of the
But without any Palestinians in it?
I beg your pardon?
But without any Palestinians in it, and apparently without any US troops
No, I think Donald Trump is trying to bring it together where they're protected.
No, he said he wants them permanently removed, so that's different.
Under the umbrella.
Dave, I'm going to have to go to a break. I'm so sorry. We're going to go straight to a break. We're going to talk to Lord McKinley, Conservative peer, up next. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense, for me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's get straight to our next guest, Conservative peer and long-time friend of the show, Lord Craig McKinley. Very good afternoon to you.
Hello, Julia.
Thank you so much. So much to talk about. I'm just going to go straight in there on Tories. Should there be some sort of deal between the Tories and Reform ahead of the next election, or are we going to be stuck with this bunch of complete useless lunatics who are currently running our country? You've got, people think that women can have a penis, that think that, we can have a successful booming economy by having the highest energy costs in the world, and you name everything. Oh yeah, and have pretty much open borders but pretend to be strict on them. The only way they're getting out of power is if Reform and Tories have a pact. Should they do that?
There's a long way to go yet, Julia. We've got 4.5 years of this diabolical socialist Labour government, and I think that will concentrate minds. I mean, just go back to July the 4th when we had that election. The morning after, it was apparent that both Conservative vote, Reform vote was very substantial. And it was more than enough to have quashed any Labour vote, and we wouldn't have had the supermajority by Labour. Now, that was bad enough the morning after the night before, but we've now been living through 6 months of a Labour government, and it is even more horrific and horrendous than any of us even considered on July the 5th. It is truly bad. It is pursuing this mad energy policy. It is prepared to give away British territory of the Chagos Islands, and not just for nothing, but with a huge dowry attached to it. We've taken away the winter fuel allowance. I could go on and on and on, and prepared to destroy our farming. So what do we do about that? We cannot have another situation where the right of centre vote is split. That does not do any of us any good. Now, we created that vacuum for ourselves. It was because of the Conservative Party. We weren't great in that last period of government. I'm the first one to say that, and I was even saying it during that period. We weren't good on immigration. Let's be very honest and be very diplomatic. It was an absolute disaster. The high taxes, well, of course, that was on the back of COVID, and I don't need to tell you, Julia, I was rather dismissive of the whole COVID proposal.
I mean, mate, you were on the right side of virtually every debate.
Well, I know I will be on net zero. It might take a little while before the lights go out to make people realise that I'm right. But anyway, let's get back to the matter in hand. Generally, I mean, obviously reform does get attractiveness to some ex-Labour voters, traditional Labour voters who've simply had enough of the woke. They're patriotic to the core. They're decent people, and they're the people actually that made the first step away from their old Labour voting habits that they probably had for a long time. They went to UKIP or Brexit Party during those European elections, and then they took the step to come to us in 2019 and gave us that very big majority.
Yeah.
We didn't thank them enough for that vote, and they're now back out in the wilderness, and many of them are voting for reform. But we have to face the fact that a lot of our voters, Conservative voters, probably more actually, have gone to reform. So that right of centre vote must never be broken up again, because we've seen what it delivers.
Yeah, but do you deserve the votes, or does reform deserve the votes? Because I think there's an awful lot of people that never leave the Tories, a lot of people on reform never leave reform. If the vote is split, the vote is split. Kemi Badenoch, whoever is leader, and Nigel Farage, whoever is leader of Reform, if they will not do a deal, the vote is split, the votes can cancel each other out, even if it's not a formal coalition, just sort of, we'll stand by, like the Brexit Party Nigel Farage did for Boris Johnson. Tories wouldn't have had an 80-strong majority if Boris Johnson had stood aside in lots of seats.
I know that very much.
Yeah, unless there is some sort of unofficial or official deal, Labour are going to win a big majority at the next election. Whose fault is that going to be?
I think another 4 years of this complete farrago that we're seeing in Westminster.
Well, then wouldn't a deal, for a lot of people might say, well, wouldn't any deal where even if you get, say, 50% of the stuff you want, wouldn't that be better than having Labour in for you guys?
Well, it would for me, obviously, Julia. I mean, I've been in politics to deliver the best for this country, and I'll do whatever is necessary for that. I happen to believe that the Conservative Party has been the best vessel for that. It didn't have the greatest last period in government. The first armed up for that one. But we are still the Conservative Party. If we can show that we have those values that we always had as a Conservative Party, and I think Kemi Badenoch is wanting to show that leg to the electorate, and I think we'll see more of that over the years to come, then perhaps that void will be filled, and many of our voters that went to reform will come back to us. But I want this job done, that we get a decent type of smaller state politics, we get net zero back where it should be, we get a grip again on immigration, and have these debates without being shouted at as racist. I think that is what the nation wants. Yep. Then that has got to be all to the good.
That would be so. Let me raise a couple of the immigration stories that are around today. We had, absurd situation, yesterday, of a case where someone wasn't deported because of his son wouldn't like foreign chicken nuggets. I mean, genuinely, there is an appeal going on. But the fact that even these things, it was only one of the reasons, but the fact these things are even mentioned and not laughed out of the tribunal is amazing. Today we've got two more. We've got a Pakistani father who was jailed for child sex offences. He basically tried to engage in sex with 3 barely pubescent girls, we're told by the court. He was jailed for 18 months. I wonder why it was so short, frankly. But he's got 2 toddlers, and basically a lower tribunal judge ruled he shouldn't be deported back to Pakistan because it would be unduly harsh for the children to be without their father. He's not allowed to live with them because he's a paedophile. He has to have only supervised contact. We've also got an extraordinary situation. A woman from Grenada, Lynthia Calise, she arrived in the UK as a visitor with her son back in 2018, 6-month visa, but carried on living here in the UK. When they tried to remove her, she basically said, but I'm married to a Latvian driver, a Latvian forklift driver who has permanent settled status here in the UK, and under Article 8 of the European Convention on Human Rights have got a right to a family life. The courts quite rightly said to her, well, your husband can go back to Grenada with you. Her response was, he wouldn't like Caribbean food and would struggle with the heat. I mean, this is the madness we are in right now. And all of this happened while the Tories were in power.
Well, I think what we're seeing is the ECHR. I was always prepared to give it the benefit of the doubt. It was started after the remnants of the Second World War for good reason.
Yeah.
But it's become a lawfare, an evolving lawfare of itself. I don't respect it. You don't respect it. And I bet if you were to go to the Red Lion or any other pub around the country, the people in there do not respect it either. I think the time has come that we say, I'm sorry, ECHR, you've gone too far. We don't respect you anymore. The nonsense has gone beyond the realms of even anything logical. It's time we left it. But you're quite right. The arguments that are put forward, usually under ECHR type dynamics of people staying in the country, whether they're hateful criminals that we really want to see the back of, the Pakistani man particularly. But we've got a problem. We've got an international problem that many of these the foreign states will not take their own criminals back.
Yeah.
Now, I suggest we take a bit of a leaf out of Donald Trump's
I was just going to suggest.
and we start using our muscularity that we do have. We actually say to countries like Pakistan, that I know do not like taking back their own criminals. Now, I can see why they don't want them, but hard luck.
Yeah.
Is, well, we're going to stop the flow of aid immediately unless you take your own criminals back, and we stop issuing visas for your students and for people to visit family in the UK. It stops now unless you start doing the right thing and take your criminals
I'm
back.
all in favour of a bit of that muscle.
That's not tough. That's not nasty. That is common sense. We need to
And
get back
perfectly
to
reasonable.
common sense.
Just finally, I want to ask you, we're going to talk to a guest about this in a few moments, but a new study has shown absolutely shocking figures here. Half of Gen Z, they're sort of 18 to 27-year-olds, so basically young adults. Half of young adults in Britain basically believe that this country is racist, and just 1 in 10 said be willing to fight for Britain in a war. Why do you think that is?
Well, it just shows what they've been being taught for all these years. They've been taught that the British past, which I think has got a great deal to credit it, bringing democracy to the world, order, all of those good things that many nations still enjoy today, was brought by the British Empire. There was some bad in it, of course, but there was an awful lot of good. But they only get taught the bad, they don't get taught the good. I've spoken to youngsters, and you talk about Trafalgar Day, 1805, the great victory of Nelson, and they don't even know who Nelson is.
It's
so
terrifying.
we've got an inculcated problem with education, and I won't even start on what they're being taught on net zero. It is absolutely shocking.
Hey, I mean, listen, we've got a new natural history museum, whole big display, and apparently it's all about how we have to save our planet. I mean, just more absolute, just more of this kind of ideology.
Yeah, but I do worry about new education bills under this new Labour government.
That said,
this rubbish even worse.
Your lot were in charge, didn't do anything about it a lot of that time. Lord McKinney, we'll have to leave it there. Always so good to talk to you because I have to appear, Lord McKinney. Very brief word from Tom Slater on that.
The net zero education stuff.
It's terrifying.
This is not the sort of thing you'd expect in a liberal. The fact we're kind of propagandising our own children to support government policy.
But also all these people, these kids, literally, these young people going like, the Earth is going to die. I mean, literally stuff that is just not scientifically based at all. The hysteria. I mean, I'm sorry. I can excuse it in Greta Thunberg. Lord, David Attenborough, sorry, he should be ashamed of himself. He's gone from being hero to zero, quite literally for me. 12:49 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. Then we're going to be talking to Connor Tomlinson about Gen Z. Why do they think our country is racist and why wouldn't they fight for it? Maybe those two things are related. This is Talk.
think Hamas are playing a very dangerous game because if they don't hold to the ceasefire terms, they're going to find air attacks coming in again and disrupting the rehabilitation of Gaza.
Well, this was just breaking news now, actually, right on time for you. Israel has just called the decision a complete violation of the ceasefire deal, which began last month, of course. Defence Minister Israel Katz says, I've instructed the IDF to prepare at the highest level of alert for any possible scenario inside Gaza.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. 12:53 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's been a bit of a lively show, hasn't it? I imagine it will continue to be so the next few minutes. And certainly when Ian Collins is here after 1. Tom Slater's editor of Spiked Online still with me. Got a guest to talk to you about this, but I want to ask your thoughts first of all. Are you proud to be British? And would you go... And do you think the UK is racist? And would you go to war for your country?
Oh, where to start?
3 key questions.
Yeah. On the kind of... Proud to be British is an interesting one. I'm certainly very grateful to have been brought up in this country, a place where I can, even though things are on the slide a little bit, but it is a generally prosperous, free place to be. The question of why younger people are increasingly not just unpatriotic, but in certain aspects being taught to be anti their own nation. I think we know where that stuff is coming from. There's a general cultural script that they're reaching for. Is that a thing that younger people just tend to indulge with before growing out of it? Maybe to a degree. I think Generation Z is often caricatured in one direction or another, when the truth is probably that they're not so unlike any other generation that's come before.
Would you fight for your country if you're called upon?
I think when push comes to shove, you would hope that everyone would, and I would try and include myself in that.
Well, Gen Z, apparently, 18 to 27-year-olds, they would not. 1 in 10, 1 in 10 only said they were willing to fight for their country in a war. A new study by the Times with pollsters at YouGov shows that actually, I think we're told, these are the first millennials coming of age. 18 to 27-year-olds. Can everyone just start talking in clean English so everyone knows what they're talking about? Young adults in this country, half of them think the country's racist. Just 1 in 10 would be willing to fight for the country. They're simply not proud to be British anymore. Connor Tomlinson is contributor at Courage Media. Connor, first of all, why do so many young people feel this way about their country?
I think there are 3 groups here, Julia, and the Times curiously didn't provide gender or ethnic breakdowns. For
Which is weird, because they're kind of obsessed with a lot of that stuff.
I know, that is very curious. So there are 3 groups. The first group is largely young women who have been raised on a steady diet of anti-British education in schools, but also on social media. Yeah. And so they think that Western civilization is the source of all the world's problems, and you can pin on it inexpungible and unique historical guilt for slavery, which we helped to abolish, or all the wars in the world. Yeah. The second group is, of course, young ethnic minorities, because Gen Z is the most diverse ethnically and therefore culturally of any generation that Britain has ever seen. And so when earlier polling said that Gen Z would quite like a strong man or an anti-democratic leader, how many of them were thinking communism? How many of them were thinking fascism? Or how many of them thinking caliphate? And that was not raised in that polling either. And the third group is young white men like me, who would actually agree that, yeah, Britain is racist because the diversity and inclusion policies of the Equality Act discriminate against me in public sector hiring. Yeah, I don't actually want to fight for my country in foreign ventures that involve bringing pride parades to Iran, for example. Yes. If we were invaded, and we are currently being invaded for our immigration policy, I would happily defend my homeland. But actually, me even saying that gets me discriminated against by my own government and put on a watch list at the Home Office who call me far right. So who and what are we defending is the question.
Yeah, no, that's a very, very good point. And I think there are a lot of people, a very age group, who question, would I want to fight for my country if there was conscription? Would I be willing to go and sign up to that for a war in a far-flung land? And I'm amazed how many people, again, they don't understand, the importance of us supporting Ukraine, for instance, or indeed the importance of us supporting Israel against the invasion from Russia in Ukraine's case, and the civilizational level attack that we see from Hamas. But this is the thing. There's a very different matter from defending defending your own country if your country was invaded, which I just can't imagine anybody not thinking that. But I think if you raise a whole generation, a couple of generations now of young people to believe that our country is, as you say, responsible for all the ills in the world and is a terrible, terrible place, that I know, we're responsible for the Industrial Revolution, not a good thing because apparently, global warming, slavery, well, we abolished it, but we were apparently uniquely responsible for slavery, a total ignorant knowledge of history, but as in every single empire has actually perpetrated slavery. That some are still doing it right now. We were the only one ever to actually pay a fortune from our own coffers to end it. But why do you think that the people who are teaching these young people, why do you think the people on social media, other than, the Russian and Chinese bots doing this, why do you think they believe that? Because that's what they're telling our kids. Why do they believe that madness?
So lots of people that have gone through the education system mainly for a secure job because they can't compete in the marketplace, and so they glom onto public sector unions and take an increasingly share of the very high tax burden. Lots of them have been hopped up on intersectional, very let's say race and gender communist ideas that have been fed,
which is what they are. Yeah,
and it's been drip fed into teacher training courses and the curriculum materials, and even the best of teachers, and I've got some in my family, unless they're very wise to this sort of stuff, will just regurgitate what the curriculum materials are because it's quite tough to stage manage 32 kids behaviourally and create new lessons every single year. On the two conflicts that you raised, though, I think they're slightly different, and allow me to elaborate.
I can't. We've only got about a minute. I can't. I've got about 30 seconds, Connor.
Ukraine, to young men like me, looks like another foreign policy venture where we are fighting for the democracy of another country while our one at home is eroded. Whereas for the Israelis, I completely get why Israel are defending their country against the Hamas terrorists. We just had the grooming gangs. I think that's a comparable crime. I think it actually indicts our government that they didn't respond to the grooming gangs in the same way as October 7th, and that's why lots of young men like me have no faith in our current ruling order.
Very interesting. Connor Tomlinson, thank you very much. He's a contributor at Courage Media. Delighted to be joined now by Ian Collins, who's going to tell us what's happening on his show. Hello.